I always remember that this is just a silly toy, and it shouldn't change the way I look at myself. And if anyone has a problem with me being myself, well, then they're probably not really my friends. I also don't just play with Barbies. I play with Legos and Mega Bloks, because while I definitely like Barbies, I like building things too, and I'm actually really good at it. My name is Tim Mortensen. I'm 43 years old, and I know that I don't need to be defined by Barbie. I can be whoever I want to be.
This is the Onion News Network.
You can stick it to the man and big tech. Join our FTL social mastodon at social.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live. Welcome to the program here. You can join the show if you want to, or you can just sit back and listen. It is completely up to you. Joining you tonight, it's Ian
and Chris.
We got some news, international level news, about a cryptocurrency crackdown that's apparently happening in India. We're talking about billions of dollars worth of cryptocurrency are being moved out of the country, apparently, as the people of India try to avoid this particular crackdown. You're going to tell us about that coming up here tonight, Chris. In related news, the Federal Reserve and the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency and the FDIC have issued a joint statement this week talking about or warning about, quote-unquote, significant risks that crypto assets may pose to the broader banking system. I'm not sure exactly how it is that crypto is going to be a threat to the banking system beyond the fact that it's just a better alternative and it could outcompete the banking system. But I don't know if that's what they're going to get into here. According to the agencies in a joint statement, quote, "It is important that risks related to the crypto asset sector that cannot be mitigated or controlled do not migrate to the banking system," the statement said. Further, quote, "Given the significant risks highlighted by recent failures of several large crypto asset companies, the agencies continue to take a careful and cautious approach related to current or proposed crypto asset related activities and exposures at each banking regulation or banking organization," unquote. Regulators are warning banks about a long laundry list of risks when it comes to crypto, including fraud, volatility, poor risk management, and contagion within the crypto sector. The agencies also flagged legal uncertainties when it comes to redemptions, ownership rights, and custody practices for crypto assets. Tuesday's statement came just minutes before Sam Bankman-Fried, co-founder and former CEO of FTX Exchange, pleaded not guilty on 8 counts of wire fraud, securities fraud, and conspiracy. He's facing up to 115 years in prison for his alleged role in the highest-profile crypto collapse to date. While regulators are still studying whether or how banks could incorporate crypto into their operations in a safe way that protects consumers, the trifecta of regulators say issuing or holding crypto that's issued, stored, or transferred on an open, public, or decentralized network is, quote, inconsistent, unquote, with safe and sound banking practices. So they're not coming right out and saying, thou shalt not do this, or that it's illegal for banks to get into cryptocurrency, but they're basically coming, they're skirting the line of saying, if you do this, this could be trouble. We won't look kindly on you, banks who might be open-minded enough to actually consider allowing your customers to invest in cryptocurrency.
I'm still failing to understand what they're suggesting is the safety aspect of it, right?
Well, there's risk involved.
What's the risk?
Well, price could go down.
This dollar goes down every day. I mean,
yes, of course, but it's planned to go down. You can expect the dollar to go down, so you know what you're getting into. Of course, there's also the risk of stocks as well, which could certainly go down in value, but somehow government safe. Well, I mean, it's just, the whole thing is just absolutely absurd on its face. I mean, how many people have lost their ass investing in stocks and then having the stock market crash or whatever, or those stocks in particular just happen to go down, and they lose their entire investment. And the government's just going to pat itself on the back and say, well, it's okay. It's regulated.
I wonder if there's any warnings anywhere about converting to any other government currency, any other dirty fiat, because
you mean other world international?
Right, because, and I say that because if you look at a lot of countries, there's hyperinflation. You got places like Venezuela, and I'm trying to think of some of the others, but yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of them. And certainly,
Turkey,
if you look
I think, might be feeling some inflationary
I don't know if they've
effects.
hit hyperinflation, but they're certainly, it's certainly, so hyperinflation is like
50% over a year.
Yeah. So if it's, I don't know, I think they may have, but
there was another one we talked about recently, and I also don't recall.
You can have high inflation, and the U.S. currently has high inflation, but it's not hyperinflation, right? So,
at least if you believe the government's numbers, we did show that it was produce that had gone up 30% in just 1 month. Like it was November, U.S. produce prices shot up 30%.
30%
in a month.
I believe it.
So I mean, you extrapolate that out. I mean, I'm not saying it's 30% every month or whatever, but over a year, it may be true that produce prices are in hyperinflation mode.
Yeah.
So it just depends on how you look at the numbers. But based on the agency's current, this is more from their statement. Based on the agency's current understanding and experience to date, I already read that one. So they're saying that it's highly. They're saying that having cryptocurrency stored with banks is potentially not "quote unquote" safe. Further, the agencies have significant safety and soundness concerns with business models that are concentrated in crypto asset related activities or have concentrated exposures to the crypto asset sector. The agencies are overseeing banks that may be exposed to risks from the crypto sector and reviewing any proposals from banks to engage in crypto activities. So apparently they have to, these banks are just so cautious, right? Like in general, banks have been very afraid of cryptocurrency from the beginning. And it may not be so much as that they're afraid of what cryptocurrency could mean for their own existence in the future. Some of these banks, and I'm basing this on an actual conversation I had with a bank president several years ago, I think at this point, there was a local bank in this area that's sort of a regional area bank, and they were going to close one of my accounts. And normally when a bank sends you a breakup letter, it's this very kind of terse corporate thing where there's not even, you don't even know who signed the letter, and it just basically says our terms of service say we can break up with you anytime we want to, and we don't have to tell you why, so bye-bye. That's usually how it goes when a corporate bank breaks up with you. But this local bank, the letter was actually signed by the bank president, and it had his office phone number at the bottom and an invitation to reach out if I had any questions. So yeah, I got questions. And I reached out, and dude scheduled a meeting with me and Chris Reitman, and we sat down with him for an hour, more than an hour, and just kind of talked to him about where he's at in banking and where he's coming from, and just kind of why the account was being shut down, and just all the questions that we had about being a banker in this world of cryptocurrency. And what he said was basically that they are deathly afraid of the federal government. They're deathly afraid of the banking regulators. And so they have to be really, really cautious, right? They just can't jump into some new thing without really doing a lot of research. And he felt as though that he didn't know enough about cryptocurrency. And apparently he is the bank president, apparently has to, because it's the size of the institution, he has to sign off on all outgoing wire transfers. And he realized he could not knowingly sign off on these wire transfers because he just didn't feel comfortable enough with where they were going. Ultimately, he didn't know enough about cryptocurrency. At least this is what he told me. And so that was the end of it. Like, he's sorry, we're just not comfortable enough with your account, so we're just going to close it off because we're afraid of what the regulators might do.
Yeah, I mean, they're holding a license. You have to have some sort of license in order to operate a bank,
state and federal as well.
Yeah, it's if you don't do what the government is or wanting you to do, and they won't even tell you what to do, they'll send you threatening letters, but they won't tell you what to do, and then you have to comply. And it's like, well, okay, well, what are you supposed to do? Well, effectively, the only thing you can do in many cases is shut down people's accounts. So
rather than try to figure out the way through the regulatory structure that, as you say, they won't even give you instructions on.
Right, and there's some good examples of this that have letters that the government has sent to banks or all financial institutions. And one of these letters went out, I don't know, probably within the last 5 years even. And it was in relation to people who have worked in the legal sex industry.
Oh, yeah.
And, despite the fact
not
that
illegal, right. It's completely legal. These people are like making pornography, for instance, or something like that.
Yeah. And, in states where it's legal or whatever, right? And it doesn't, and it's not illegal at the federal level or anything, but because right. There's, the banks and the government's letter doesn't say in the legal industry, but how do you tell or distinguish between somebody who is doing something legally and not? And so basically what it basically did was, because there's so much risk there, they're forced to shut down anybody, even if they're not in the sex industry currently, even people who have been out of the sex industry for 20 years, their accounts still got closed at every single financial institution, because none of the financial institutions could do anything other than shut down, because, and they use words, they don't say words like, in the sex industry, they'll say things like sex trafficking, but then they don't define sex trafficking.
Right.
And so, and it's become this all-encompassing word. So it ends up including legal activities that have, Yeah.
On the point about sex trafficking, I was reading, there's somebody on Twitter who represents herself as a victim of sex trafficking, and she's like speaking out and, that kind of thing. And on its face, it sounds fine. But then I saw this other post. I don't remember if it was from her. I think it might have been. And it essentially was like widening the definition of sex trafficking, like you were talking about. Because when you think about sex trafficking, or at least when I think about it, I think someone is a sex slave. Someone is being held against their will. They're, for instance, having their family threatened, because that's in a lot of cases when somebody, is either kidnapped to be forced into sex slavery. They're told things like, well, look, if you try to run, we're just going to go ahead and kill your parents, right? Like that's the kind of thing.
Right.
That's why they stay in the hotel room or whatever, instead of just trying to make a run for it.
Yeah, that's not what they mean by sex trafficking these days.
Not these days. No, they basically were saying that anyone who's like manipulated in some way, like if somebody hires you to do a thing and they didn't quite tell you everything that...
And manipulation includes being paid.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
So, so anybody who's ever worked in the sex industry has been trafficked, basically, is what they would say.
These people would say that.
It's that crazy.
Yeah.
And it's obviously,
and so the banks don't want to be associated with quote unquote sex trafficking, even if it's
they can't
legal.
afford to be if the government's telling them, we're going to take your license away, and then they can't operate. And it's
right. And so now you have this letter from the FDIC, from the Office of Comptroller of the Currency, and the Federal Reserve. These are the three top banking regulatory agencies that is almost essentially telling banks that, hey, we don't think you should do this. We don't think those of you few banks, and there's only a few of them, who are open-minded enough to actually accept accounts from cryptocurrency-related businesses, to potentially even allow their own customers to hold or to purchase cryptocurrencies through their banking system. They are being told that...
What I'm curious about is, who do you think this is targeting? Because I can't imagine... I mean, banks are already so... they won't do business with you if you use cryptocurrency. So who are these...
There are a few that are friendly.
Are they targeting? Because it seems to me like they're targeting cryptocurrency exchanges and similar...
well, I think what they want to do is dry up the options for the crypto exchanges. Now, there's a bank called Silvergate Bank. It's based out of California. They are kind of known as the crypto exchange bank, meaning that this is a bank that will actually open accounts for cryptocurrency exchanges, And they make you do all kinds of hoop jumping, of course, right? Because they're not just going to allow anybody to open an account. They're going to do their due diligence and verify you got all the government paperwork and etc. They were involved with the FTX exchange, and I don't know. I've seen some of the headlines. I've not dug deeply into the stories. It looks like it did not go well for them in that particular case. So that could be part of the why these regulatory agencies are kind of coming in heavier than ever on this. I don't think they've gone out of business or anything like that, but they may have lost some money on that deal because they had some sort of involvement with FTX. But they're not the only ones. There are some other banks out there. There was one in Vegas that was actually purchased. It was just kind of like a local bank. It only had 2 branches. It was in Vegas, and it was purchased. I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of it, but it was purchased by a cryptocurrency sort of magnate or whatever, some guy that's been very successful with crypto. I don't know if he's involved in exchanges or whatever, but he wanted to have a bank that would have been friendly towards potentially cryptocurrency accounts. So there's probably no more than like 5 of them, but there are some. I mean, there's also the ones that will do business with like Uphold, which is a cryptocurrency kind of exchange thing that has a crypto debit card as well. And so whenever you get one of these crypto debit cards, you look on the back and it will say account provided by blankety blank bank, right? So there's one that's Metropolitan Commercial Bank. I've seen that one. They're based in New York City. Sutton Bank is another one. So there's a few banks that, you know, when you open an account with Uphold, you're opening an account with a financial tech firm, not a bank. But they sort of on your behalf have an account from which that debit card operates.
Do they have does Uphold have like an exchange, like, or is it just strictly?
It's not an exchange in the sort of traditional sense, but I believe you can. It has been a while since I could use Uphold, you know, with my bail conditions.
Well, back in those days.
But if I recall correctly, there was a way to exchange between cryptocurrencies or purchase cryptocurrencies with dollar deposits from a bank account there. But it's not like the traditional kind of exchange where you can put in a limit purchase on an exchange and then it just sits and waits for somebody to buy it. So it's not that sort of exchange.
Yeah, I'm just wondering like what enabled them to do what they did versus, you know, maybe some other crypto exchange, or, you know, because you'd almost think that you think almost that you would do if you're going to jump through all those hoops, right? You would do an exchange, or you would do more than just that. But something's limited. I mean, if they're limiting themselves, it sounds like they may not.
They may have just a different business model, right?
Could be.
So these crypto fueled debit cards, of which there are a large variety in the marketplace these days. For listeners that aren't familiar, the idea is that you get a traditional looking Visa/MasterCard debit card, and in the background of that debit card, there's a way to kind of load it with a balance based on cryptocurrency. Not that the card itself has Bitcoin attached to it per se. Most of them don't. Most of them, you can like load Bitcoin into your account, and then you can authorize it to say, all right, I want to take $300 worth of this Bitcoin and put the $300 in cash onto this card. And so that's what most of them do. To that extent, that could result in those companies getting a portion of the fees, right? So whenever you check out at a merchant, they might be paying 3% to the credit card company. Right. There may be a deal there, and I'm just speculating, right, that Uphold, maybe they get 1% of the 3%, and then Visa gets 2%. That's a possibility, right?
Absolutely.
So, I mean, they may be looking at that as, well, we'd rather make our money on that than have to deal with the hassle of running a Bitcoin exchange or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, there definitely are certain aspects of the law that say things like for profit. So you kind of have to wonder, did they sell the Bitcoin, or well, I guess did they buy the Bitcoin from people, but they didn't make a profit off that, but then they made the profit off the fees from the swiping.
Fees, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and maybe that got around some of the hoop jumping in order to reduce their costs.
And maybe that would, if that's true, maybe that would allow some of the banks to feel more comfortable doing business with those companies.
Yeah. don't know. It's interesting questions.
Yeah. So, right now you got the OCC, according to the story here at Yahoo Finance, the OCC, the Office of Comptroller of the Currency. This is a top banking regulator. They put in place rules where banks must now ask permission to be able to engage in any cryptocurrency activities. The acting comptroller of the currency, Michael Su, has compared crypto to derivatives in the early 2000s, warning about the risk of contagion with crypto and saying the industry's growth has been driven by hype. Now, maybe that's true to some extent. There has been a lot of hype in the last several years around cryptocurrency. There's been a lot of growth simply surrounding the idea of number go up. Hey, investment, best investment of the last decade. Don't miss out. That kind of thing, right? So people are definitely, there were a lot of people jumping in for FOMO, which is the fear of missing out. So there's no doubt that did drive a lot of crypto sales. That's probably what was behind the big crypto spike in 2017 and the big crypto spike in 2021.
.com bubble all over again.
Yeah, but the reality is, those of us that know a thing or two about cryptocurrency know that underneath that hype, there really is technology worthy of being excited about.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, whether that's what people were being excited about as opposed to number go up, that's up to the individual, as to why they want to invest or purchase something.
Yeah, I was always amazed, people like buy into it just for the sake of holding it. I've always been like, if I'm going to invest in something, like I would want to invest in something surrounding it, right? Like maybe getting it out there,
a concept, something that's important.
Vending machines, right? Or, merchant tools to enable businesses to accept it, or, something that because just holding it doesn't get it used. And what's the value? The value is in its ability to reduce the cost. At least one of the things that I think that has value in it is the ability to reduce the cost of conducting transactions.
Yes.
As you were saying earlier, every time you swipe a card, you're paying 3%. Your prices are going up by 3% or more. I see occasionally 6% actually for those charges.
Discover can be that high for sure.
It can be. It depends on the type of card somebody has. It depends on if it's a U.S. card or an international or a card outside the United States. There's a bunch of different factors that go into it, and then double that because you got to buy. You as a merchant have to buy products too from your suppliers.
Using a card to do that?
In many cases, you have no other choice other than to use a credit card.
Right.
So I mean, it's amazing how much the banks and financial institutions, basically cause prices to go up like fairly substantially. In some cases.
No wonder they are so desperate to stop cryptocurrency.
Oh yeah.
But credit to the handful of banks out there that are open-minded enough and forward-thinking enough to say, this doesn't look good for us in the future. Maybe we should embrace this new competition rather than trying to shut them out, rather than trying to pretend they don't exist or act like it's dangerous. And of course, that's what this whole point of this article is here, is to have these government agencies saying, ooh, it's scary. Cryptocurrency's dangerous. It's risky. And so and the fact is they can't control it. That's what they ultimately are admitting here, is that we cannot regulate this. We cannot control it. And so therefore, since we cannot control it or regulate it, those entities that we do regulate, shall not touch it without our permission, which we're no longer going to give you. The number here is 603-283-6160. It hasn't gotten to the point where you cannot send a wire transfer to a crypto exchange, but what would stop them from doing that in the future? It's Free Talk Live.
So the protection of life, liberty, and property is what the Free State Project is all about. But it's an effort to move 20,000 people who understand.
It's about demonstrating to the entire country
that, we can have a free market, a truly free market.
Making it just a freer, great place to live.
It's the world's largest voluntarist libertarian community, and it's only getting bigger.
That's amazing, to be able to move to a place where other people passionately believe in being free and independent.
What the Free State Project is managing to do, though, is to put their money where their mouth is. It's physically getting up across the country and saying, let's go someplace and let's demonstrate the power of these ideas. There's a lot of kind of philosophy that surrounds liberty. There's a lot of thinking about it and talking about it. But here in New Hampshire, people are doing it.
101 Reasons Liberty Lives in New Hampshire, a documentary by Free State Project Early Movers. Watch it free at 101reasonsfilm.com. 101reasonsfilm.com.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Simon Marks. Republican Kevin McCarthy may be just hours away now from becoming the new Speaker of the House of Representatives. He managed to persuade 15 dissident Republicans who opposed him in a dozen separate votes to back him. And work continues to secure the remaining support he needs, not just to win the job, but to bring an extraordinary week of chaos on Capitol Hill to an end. From FSN's Washington Bureau, Caroline Malone reports.
Kevin McCarthy is almost the new House Speaker. A furious lobbying campaign is underway to get as many of the Republicans voting against him to change their minds. McCarthy has had to make concessions to convince the hard-right, more conservative members of the Republican Party not to vote against him.
Meanwhile, President Biden has been marking the second anniversary of the January 6th uprising by Donald Trump's supporters on Capitol Hill. He awarded the Presidential Citizens Medal to more than a dozen police officers and election workers who pushed back against his predecessor's false claims that the 2020 US election was rigged. In other news, a major defense package has been announced for Ukraine, with several Western countries banding together to provide infantry fighting vehicles for the country's ground forces. The US, Germany and France will supply the equipment, as FSN's Trent Murray reports from our Berlin bureau.
Two different types of infantry fighting vehicles are being given to Ukraine, the US-made Bradley and German-made Marder. Neither are considered a tank, but both have mounted firepower and also provide armoured protection for troops being transported in conflict zones. While the number of deliveries has not yet been confirmed, the German outlet Der Spiegel reports that as many as 40 Marders could be on their way. Germany has also donated a Patriot air defence battery to help Ukraine intercept Russian missiles.
A group of British Union leaders say they're hoping to have a meaningful conversation with Prime Minister Rishi Sunak on Monday. The face-to-face gathering will occur after ambulance workers became the latest public sector employees to announce industrial action later this month. The Prime Minister says he's open to discussing affordable solutions to the crisis, but Paul Novak of the Trades Union Congress says the devil will be in the details.
What they haven't invited us to do next week is to have meaningful negotiations about the current pay disputes. What they've said is that we can have technical discussions about the remit of the pay review bodies for the coming. And I think those sorts of technical discussions aren't going to help our paramedics, our firefighters, our civil servants and our teachers pay their bills right now.
Inflation in the Eurozone is back in single figures, having dropped for the second month in a row. The latest numbers are boosting hopes that the bloc's economic woes might be easing, and unemployment in the US fell from 3.7 to 3.5% in December, but the latest numbers announced on Friday were slightly higher than analysts predicted. From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Don't miss a moment of Free Talk Live. Get our archives daily via our podcast at feeds.freetalklive.com.
It is Free Talk Live. Phones are open. If you want to join us here, the number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Maybe you're aware of some of these, the few crypto-friendly banks that are out there right now, because apparently the Office of Comptroller of the Currency and Federal Reserve and the FDIC are issuing a notice to all banking institutions saying, hey, look, we're not saying you can't do this, but we're basically saying you can't do this.
Trying to ban it without actually an explicit ban, it sounds like.
Yeah, they're basically putting pressure on the bank, saying, look, this is risky, this is dangerous. We wouldn't want you, our trusted banking institutions, to be involved in anything that could bring your customers risk. So therefore, we think you should stay away from these things. In fact, we're going to require you to ask for our permission before you get involved in any kind of crypto-related activities. Now, I don't know what that's going to mean for the banks that are already involved in crypto-related activities, the handful of them that are doing that sort of thing. But if you want to comment, maybe you're in the banking industry, maybe you're in the crypto world, you want to join us here, the number is 603-283-6160. It seems like lines are being drawn, sort of lines in the sand by the federal government saying, we would advise you not cross that line.
Is this an actual letter that was sent to the banks, or how did they?
Apparently, let me see if I can.
How did this
get the exact definition of what this thing was here? The report is from Yahoo Finance, and it is a statement. So they issued a joint statement.
So maybe like a letter to the banks or something like that.
It is apparently a 2-3-page long joint statement on crypto asset risks to banking organizations. So I don't know if that gets sent to all of the banks by default, or they're expected to know about it.
It's definitely not as clear as some of the things that have been reported on in the past as to certain industries that, the government has said, you better not do business with these people.
I actually did just pull up the actual letter here, and we were just reading the report on it, but I just happened to spot this. It says, banking organizations are neither prohibited nor discouraged from providing banking services to customers of any specific class or type as permitted by law or regulation. The agencies are continuing to assess whether or how current and proposed crypto asset-related activities by banking organizations can be conducted in a manner that adequately addresses safety and soundness, consumer protection, legal permissibility, and compliance with applicable laws and regulations, including anti-money laundering and illicit finance statutes and rules. Based on the agency's current understanding and experience to date, the agencies believe that issuing or holding as principal crypto assets that are issued, stored, or transferred on an open public or decentralized network or similar system is highly likely to be inconsistent with safe and sound banking practices. So in the same paragraph, they're saying, look, we're not telling you can't do this. I mean, if it's legal, then you can do it, but it may be considered to be inconsistent with safe and sound banking practices.
You know what it sounds like they're saying is effectively, this may be legal, but we'll suspend your licenses if you go down this path because it they didn't outright say it violates like their licensure, but
they're coming right up to the line.
Right, they're coming right up to that line and saying it without saying it. And this is exactly the same thing that they've done in the past, with other industries that the government, they're completely legal industries, but the government doesn't want banks or financial institutions to do business with you, and therefore they say they did the exact same thing.
Further, the agencies have significant safety and soundness concerns with business models that are concentrated in crypto asset-related activities or have concentrated exposures. So there's to the crypto asset sector. So they're just saying they're concerned. They're worried for their banking friends that they may get into hot water with these regulators. Now, they're not saying they're turning the temperature up quite yet, but the water could be getting hot for you if you decide to get involved with these crypto-related activities. We would just like to let you know that we're monitoring the situation closely. And it's like, these bankers aren't known for taking risks with their business, right? They're not going to risk regulatory attack. They're not going to risk pissing off the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency or the Federal Reserve or the FDIC, because if they piss those people off, they're out of business. Like you said, they'll pull the license, and you don't have a bank anymore after that. If you try to operate, I remember years ago we had somebody call in. Actually, it was a friend of it was a host on the show who knew someone in California who had opened a warehouse bank. And he shouldn't have used the word bank, number one. But number two, they probably would have shut him down anyway. But what the dude was doing was he was offering essentially deposit services for people while not being an actual registered legal bank. And guess what happened to him?
They'll definitely fry you for that.
Yeah, they came in with armed thugs, and they put a stop to his warehouse bank.
Yeah, people have been doing that since the 90s, at least, maybe probably even earlier than that. But I remember hearing about people getting, charged and, thrown through the system for basically doing similar kinds of stuff.
That's probably when this happened. Based on when we were talking about it, was like more than a decade ago that we talked about it.
It's definitely happened repeatedly over, decades. But,
Well, I mean, just look at what they're doing to, prior to cryptocurrency, there was another great alternative. Of course, we're big fans of gold and silver here on Free Talk Live, and we've been telling you about Bullion Max, for instance. BullionMax.com/FTL is, of course, where you can go to get some of the most stable assets in recorded history, which are gold and silver. BullionMax.com/FTL is where you can get their special silver starter kit, employee pricing, For Free Talk Live listeners there, it's 5 ounces of silver from the world's most popular mints, and they'll throw in a free gold back for you as well. So go to bullionmax.com/FTL. But before, you've been able to order things like gold and silver products from Bullion Max and companies like it for decades. But what they were doing with the Liberty Dollar back in the aughts, so the last 2 decades ago at this point, was they were creating an alternative currency. They weren't just selling silver rounds. They were selling these beautiful pieces. You can't call them coins because that's like a legal term, but they were selling ounces of silver that were intended to be used as a currency. They weren't just intended to sit in a safe until the S hits the fan and then maybe you'll need them someday, the kind of thing. The intention was to exchange them with people for products and services. That was the idea behind the Liberty Dollar. And for years, they were the #1 alternative currency. This is, again, prior to crypto. So from basically, I think, 1998 on through about 2007, they issued millions of dollars worth of the Liberty Dollar. I was involved with them back 20 years ago as one of their what they called Liberty Associates, where I would get sort of a wholesale rate and then try to get them out into the community. I wasn't particularly successful at it, but they were really beautiful pieces, and just the people that understood and appreciated silver were big fans of them. And the federal government was not a big fan because they came in. They went to the vault. They went to the mint where the Liberty Dollar was produced. I believe it was called Sunshine Mint in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And they came there with however many goons that they had. They came in. They were allowed in to the Sunshine Mint. There's armed guards at the front, of course, but they're not going to stop the government from coming in. And they took all of the Liberty Dollar silver that was in that vault. So in addition to making actual physical rounds that they were distributing, they also made warehouse receipts. So they had these certificates basically that were good, supposedly were good for 1 ounce of silver that was being stored in the warehouse. Well, until the feds took it all. And years later, they ended up having to give it back after a court case. There was like a lawsuit or something like that. But not everybody got it back. I didn't get mine back just because I didn't want to join the lawsuit. I was just like, you know what? I don't want to put my name on a list or whatever, even though my name was probably already on a list. That's
funny coming from you.
Yeah, I didn't get mine back. But they did have to give them back ultimately. But they destroyed the Liberty Dollar business. They destroyed it as an organization. They went after Bernard von Nothaus, who was its founder, for quote-unquote counterfeiting charges. And a jury found him guilty.
Yeah,
of those charges.
Our system is so messed up. I mean, it's like it doesn't matter if you're 100% right, you're within the law.
Yeah.
They just get a jury that's so biased against, a defendant, and that's it, You at best, even when you're 100% obviously innocent, you have a 50-50 chance. And that's the best case scenario. You should be 100% no chance that, if you're innocent, there should never be a conviction. But nope, that's not how it is.
Look at the Crypto 6 case. It happened all over again. I mean, we did legal research to make sure, and so did Bernard von Nothaus from the Liberty Dollar. He figured he had all his T's crossed and all his I's dotted, and he'd been in business for almost a decade at that point, doing this thing of distributing this alternative currency. And they came in and they destroyed him. And then there was, of course, e-gold, if you recall that one. That was an online gold currency kind of thing. That this is, again, pre-crypto. So it was still a centralized system. It wasn't, like Bitcoin where it was decentralized or anything. So they went after the e-gold corporation and they took it down too.
The Crypto 6 case is so crazy because it's like, okay, there's government officials telling you what you're doing is legal. You've got you've got lawyers telling you what you're doing is legal, right? You're doing more KYC than the banks are doing that you're not even really required to do. It's like, I mean,
but the banks aren't getting charged. They're not going to prison. They're not going to be...
not a single one of those, so-called victims in that case.
They're not going to pay a single fine.
The banks lost nothing, and the prosecution has said that. And the victims, the banks didn't stop. The banks are actually supposed to do KYC, but obviously they either didn't or it didn't stop the transactions from occurring anyway.
Yeah.
The only person I think that those victims, those so-called victims, said ever even reached out to them was you.
That's my recollection of what happened during the trial.
Yep.
Yeah. And if you want to read more about the Crypto 6 case, you can go to freekeen.com, where Chris spent 3 weeks of his life sitting in a courtroom writing excessive notes and then transcribing them onto various detailed blog posts. And I've heard many people say they really appreciated that, Chris. So if they haven't told you personally, then I've definitely heard about it.
Left and right, I've heard people saying it. So I'm glad, because it means that people were I don't know how many people read it, but there were definitely people who read the whole thing, and I'm actually surprised.
It's exhausting.
Yeah, if you read that whole, even just a single day worth,
it's a lot.
It's a lot.
Yeah. So anyway, if you want to comment here, you're welcome to join us. The number is 603-283-6160. But as I was saying, it sounds like the feds are kind of drawing a line in the sand. They're basically telling the banks, hey, look, we're not saying you can't do this, but basically if you do it, we're going to jump down your throat and you're going to hate life. So don't do this, okay? It's legal for you to do it, but don't do it. And that's where it seems to be coming from. And, of course, they're using the FTX situation as their excuse for coming in and issuing these most recent notices. Oh, it's like, okay, someone in business failed. Wow, this doesn't happen. Businesses don't fail. Somebody in business failed, so therefore this entire business is now on the outs. We cannot trust you guys to have banking, provide banking services to businesses that could fail. Oh, wait, that happens all the time, doesn't it?
Yep.
Businesses fail. That's what happens.
Look at the .com bust.
Right.
I mean, people invested in businesses that had literally no business models. They had no value. There wasn't any perceivable value in many cases.
How many of those got bank loans, I wonder?
I mean, they certainly got investors, lots of investors. I mean, all those investors lost their shirt. Now, it doesn't mean that and then the crazy thing is, like, it's not even like all the businesses in the .com era were bad or couldn't necessarily work. A lot of them could, but a lot of them went under still. But some of them were just ahead of their time, or they needed larger numbers, and there wasn't enough people on the internet yet, or
maybe poor management. Who knows?
Right, poor management. Or overspending. Because they were competing with other businesses that had all this free money, so to speak, and so they were paying too much. Per customer. I'm trying to think what they call it. Acquisition. Yeah, customer acquisition numbers were they were just paying too much per customer, basically. So.
Here's more about the FTX situation. So this is a related story from The Hill. The digital dollar coming in on the back of the FTX collapse. The arrest of Sam Bankman-Fried may be the smaller news story coming out of the collapse of FTX. Politicians will miss the point surrounding the massive political donations of the company and instead push for simplistic solutions to a complex issue. Ultimately, the collapse of the crypto company could lead to onerous federal regulations and the establishment of a federal digital dollar. Now, look, I don't think that, if they're using FTX as the excuse for the digital dollar, it doesn't really connect for me. It doesn't really make any sense. Why would they need to have a failed crypto exchange to launch a digital dollar on? I mean, they already have all the rationale that they need for the digital dollar. For them, it's more control. Total control of people's finances, total awareness of what people will be spending money on, and that's all the reason they need right there.
I get why somebody would adopt a cryptocurrency, like an actual cryptocurrency. I don't mean a stable coin, but an actual cryptocurrency, decentralized, you control it, etc. I don't understand why somebody would want, what's the incentive for somebody to go and adopt a U.S. digital dollar? Like,
somebody, are you talking about? When you say somebody, do you mean an individual or a business?
I mean like an individual, right? Like, why would somebody go out of
welfare
the way?
Payments?
For payments?
Welfare payments.
Welfare payments. Okay. I'm just trying to think, like, how are they going to sell this to the public? Because it doesn't seem, and I feel like we even have a story where somebody rolled out the first digital,
I think Nigeria has one.
Yeah, but I think it totally failed. And
it's being... it is not being accepted well by the people of Nigeria.
Yeah,
apparently.
And it just kind of begs the question of, like, okay, you've got all of this backing, you got government backing and everything, and they can't make it work. And then you ask the question of, well, why? And it's because it doesn't have any of the things that makes an actual cryptocurrency valuable, right? You don't have the control, you don't have the freedom, you don't have the liberty.
Which is exactly why they want it. That's exactly why they want to shove it down people's throats.
Right.
And that's, in my opinion, that's how they're going to do it, Chris, is they're going to force people to accept it if they want to get government payments. payments. And if you think about the number of people who are receiving government payments, it's significant, right? Like, I mean, we've seen some of the estimates over the years that maybe as many as 50% of U.S. households have someone in them who is receiving some form of government payment. And that could include contractors, right? That could include individuals on welfare. So there's a whole range of types of people that are getting government money. Everybody on Social Security, anybody getting Medicaid or Medicare.
I'm always wondering, like, how many of those people are actually getting money, free money, so to speak, and how many of them are just getting their money back? Because they take so much from us just across the board. Like, even people who are poor, they're still paying taxes. They're paying hidden taxes.
Unless it's Sarah. She doesn't. She's probably getting more than she pays in, right?
You might be right, but it's such a large percentage of. I think the way to phrase it is, I think they call them working poor, right? So people who are actually doing something. They're productive people, right? But they're paying tax. They're paying all these hidden taxes, and yes, they're getting money from the government, so to speak. But that money is probably coming from their own pocket. It's coming from their employers.
Good chance of it.
It's coming from the increased prices that they're paying at the store,
right? Big time. What are the employers paying in Social Security? Like 15% or something like that? I think 14, 15, somewhere in that range, 13 and a half.
I think it's like 15%, and then another 15% comes out of your paycheck. So you're paying. It ends up being like something like 30%. But that's
I thought it was 15, half one. I thought it was 7.5 and 7.5. Anyway,
okay. So self-employment is 30%. Which
I was talking about employees,
right? But self-employment covers everything that your employer and you would be paying in.
I see. Oh, okay.
It's then
there's the FICA or whatever. There's all these other things, right?
And that's not 30%. Might not sound like a lot, but what I think people are forgetting is that there's all these other taxes that they're paying that they don't know about. Taxes. And like for example, 25. If you buy any kind of electronics in the United States right now, 25% of the price is or maybe even twice that, is tariffs. And so the company importing it is paying the government, and then they're increasing their prices. So you're still paying. You're paying these taxes you don't even know about, and that's on top of the sales taxes in most states.
Sure. And then every gas tax, you're paying all the when you pay for that piece of electronics, not only are you paying for the import fee or whatever, the tariff, but you're also paying the tax that the trucker the professional driver that took that to the Best Buy or whatever also had to pay. I mean, you can't even calculate what those numbers are.
I don't even think the gas tax is so much, I understand the gas tax isn't actually going to the roads, but anyway.
You're paying the tax on the electricity that the store that you bought the TV from is displaying the TV to you with.
There's usually going to be some sort of property taxes that you're paying of the store because that increases the prices. There's all these hidden taxes, and it adds up, and you end up paying. I figured at one point it's probably something like high 70s, 80% of your income's going to government, basically.
It's
but
insane.
I think from what I've heard, other people have said it's actually way higher than that.
We would be so much wealthier if we didn't have the federal government lording over our lives and extracting so much wealth. And now you're talking about, I'm sure the 70 or 80 or 90 or whatever it is all levels of government combined.
Yeah.
But I suspect the feds are the largest chunk of that.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know.
They've got to be.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question. I don't know. I haven't ever done the math that way. I usually just like kind of add up, things like tariffs and sales taxes and income taxes and property taxes, and then figure it out. And property taxes are pretty high though too.
They are, but not always, not everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, if you want to join us, join the discussion. The number here is 603-283-6160. But that was an aside from the discussion of the CBDC, the central bank digital currency, and you were wondering aloud, well, how are they going to do this? If people don't want to stop using cash, how are they going to stop them, right? Like
well, they could go the India route where they just ban all bills over like $1.23 or something like that.
That's one idea. Yeah, well, we know they've already banned the $500 and the $1,000 bill. That's been in play for decades.
Right.
So, and that was to quote unquote fight drug dealing, right? Back when they did that.
Yep.
And of course, it hasn't stopped drug selling at all, but it's just made it a little more inconvenient. Now the drug dealer has to carry a whole briefcase of cash instead of, a fifth of a briefcase of cash. It's stupid. But they're going to do welfare payments. That's an easy way to get people hooked on the government CBDC money is, all right, well, starting on, January 1st, 2025, all welfare payments are going to be through the CBDC. You're going to need to download the new Federal Reserve wallet, and you've got you've got until January, and then we're going to cut you off. So go ahead and get signed up as soon as you can, and we'll get you your welfare payments there.
I think, the even more devious one I suspect that they may try to play is something to that effect, where that's the default, but with tax refunds, right?
That too. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Any money coming out of the federal government, once they do this, and they're still not 100% saying they're going to do it. They're just researching and studying and coming up with actual working programs from MIT and things like that. So they're down this rabbit hole, and the odds that they're going to stop going down it are very, very slim. But it still isn't quote unquote a done deal yet. But yeah, once it's done, any kind of payments from the government, like I said, Medicare, welfare, Social Security, tax refund, you name it.
You know what they'll do after that is they'll charge you to receive a check in the mail, or they'll charge you for a traditional wire transfer to your account for your tax refund.
That way you can't say, well, you're not, you're cutting me off.
And they'll excuse that charge because it costs them money. In reality, it costs them probably just as much doing it the other way. But if you look at something like toll roads, right? It used to be you paid the same, and then you got a discount if you had what they call Easy Pass on the East Coast. But now it's now it's, if you look, they not only do you not get a discount, I put that in quotes here, but they also charge you additionally to mail a piece of paper to the owner's, vehicle owner's address, and then you're supposed to pay that on top of additional fees.
You mean if you get caught running the toll booth? You're talking about
if you run the toll booth. There is no toll booth. It's called cashless tolling.
Right. But that's what you mean is when you go through the Easy Pass without the Easy Pass, and they take your picture, and then they send you the threatening letter or whatever. Yeah.
So it's you think and eventually they make it so difficult to avoid and so expensive that pretty much everybody gives in. Outside of that, maybe 3% of the population who just has they're so against it, right? Because they see right through the lies, right? And they have principles. Outside of those that 3%, maybe, pretty much everybody else gets on board.
So they're going to pay out, as you said, any kind of payment from the federal government is going to come out in the CBDC. But then the question is, how do you get businesses to accept it, right? Because it still has to be useful. I mean, you can't just give people the CBDC and then they can't spend it anywhere, right? So, of course, Walmart, all the big, mega corporations, they're going to come on board, and they're going to make it so their cash registers can accept this stuff. And then the small businesses will be pressured because, well, you don't want to miss out.
If you're looking for work, there's a piece of paper more important than your resume. It's the cover letter attached if you're snail mailing, or the email to which you attach your resume. Make it 4 short paragraphs. Paragraph 1, say that you're applying for work. The person you're sending to gets a ton of mail about all sorts of things. If you have a password, that's your first sentence. Tom Nelson tells me you and I should meet. Paragraph 2, what you do and how that relates to the opening. Be as specific as possible. Paragraph 3, why you want this particular job. I'm originally from Boston, so I know the market well. I have family and friends in the area, so this would be a homecoming for me. Paragraph 4, unless the job posting stipulates no calls, and I will call you to follow up. Thank you in advance for your time. From survivalspeech.com, I'm Holland Cook.
My name is Jacob Hornberger. I'm president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, which Congressman Ron Paul awarded for having an outstanding freedom website. Write us at fff@fff.org, and we'll send you a free 3-month subscription to our monthly journal of libertarian essays and our booklet, Economic Liberty in the Constitution, which George Mason University economics professor Walter Williams praised in a recent column. That's fff@fff.org.
Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. Chat.lrn.fm.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 2 is next, after the news, here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.fm.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Simon Marks. Republican Kevin McCarthy may be just hours away now from becoming the new Speaker of the House of Representatives. He managed to persuade 15 dissident Republicans who opposed him in a dozen separate votes to back him. And work continues to secure the remaining support he needs, not just to win the job, but to bring an extraordinary week of chaos on Capitol Hill to an end. From FSN's Washington Bureau, Caroline Malone reports.
Kevin McCarthy is almost the new House Speaker. A furious lobbying campaign is underway to get as many of the Republicans voting against him to change their minds. McCarthy has had to make concessions to convince the hard-right, more conservative members of the Republican Party not to vote against him.
Meanwhile, President Biden has been marking the second anniversary of the January 6th uprising by Donald Trump's supporters on Capitol Hill. He awarded the Presidential Citizens Medal to more than a dozen police officers and election workers who pushed back against his predecessor's false claims that the 2020 US election was rigged. In other news, a major defence package has been announced for Ukraine, with several Western countries banding together to provide infantry fighting vehicles for the country's ground forces. The US, Germany and France will supply the equipment, as FSN's Trent Murray reports from our Berlin bureau.
2 different types of infantry fighting vehicles are being given to Ukraine. The US-made Bradley and German-made Marder. Neither are considered a tank, but both have mounted firepower and also provide armoured protection for troops being transported in conflict zones. While the number of deliveries has not yet been confirmed, the German outlet Der Spiegel reports that as many as 40 Marders could be on their way. Germany has also donated a Patriot air defence battery to help Ukraine intercept Russian missiles.
A group of British Union leaders say they're hoping to have a meaningful conversation with Prime Minister Rishi Sunak on Monday. The face-to-face gathering will occur after ambulance workers became the latest public sector employees to announce industrial action later this month. The Prime Minister says he's open to discussing affordable solutions to the crisis, but Paul Novak of the Trades Union Congress says the devil will be in the details.
What they haven't invited us to do next week is to have meaningful negotiations about the current pay disputes. What they've said is that we can have technical discussions about the remit of the pay review bodies for the coming. And I think those sorts of technical discussions aren't going to help our paramedics, our firefighters, our civil servants and our teachers pay their bills right now.
Inflation in the Eurozone is back in single figures, having dropped for the second month in a row. The latest numbers are boosting hopes that the bloc's economic woes might be easing, and unemployment in the US fell from 3.7 to 3.5% in December, but the latest numbers announced on Friday were slightly higher than analysts predicted. From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks. With no further ado, a look at the fallout from revelations contained in Prince Harry's memoir, in which he calls his brother Prince William his arch-nemesis and claims that the heir to the British throne physically attacked him in a row over the character of Harry's wife, Meghan Markle. What to make of it all? Royal commentator Peter Hunt.
What supporters of the institution would say is we need to take a step back, we need to take a breath, we need to regulate, and we need to remember that this is an institution that weathered and thrived and survived an abdication crisis, the War of the Waleses, the marriage of Charles and Diana disintegrating in the 1980s, the collapse of 3 of the 4 marriages of the late Queen's children, the death of Diana in 1997. That week was probably the worst week of Queen Elizabeth's reign. They survived all that. They have prospered. And so supporters would say we need to sort of breathe and look at this in that context. I think what has changed in terms of the context is as each year passes, that level of deference that was once extended towards the royal family has abated and reduced. And I think the other key issue that the institution in particular will be focusing on is how young people see all of this and their interpretation of how the institution has treated Harry and Meghan. In polls, it is the younger people who show a sort of less strength in terms of their support for the institution of the British monarchy.
We already know what's in the book, and it's not officially out until next Tuesday. The main news again. Republican Kevin McCarthy may be just hours away from becoming the new Speaker of the House of Representatives after persuading some wavering right-wingers to back him. The US, Germany and France have jointly pledged to provide infantry fighting vehicles to Ukraine, and a group of British Union leaders say they're hoping for meaningful conversations with Prime Minister Rishi Sunak on Monday as a wave of public sector strikes cripples the country. And that is the latest feature story news. Simon Marks reporting.
Jode Cress Beckler. From claim jumpers to politicians to coyotes, the straight shooter that shook up the presidential race is taking them all on and licking them good.
Hello, Jode.
Who and what's behind these potato monkey shines?
Well, these scientists are trying to mass-produce potatoes that are more resistant to disease, but they're doing so in potentially dangerous ways that alter their DNA.
Tater disease what brung us Irish.
Right.
You give a tater man's constitution, you can bet he's coming to play old Joe to call.
Yes, well, nature's revenge could come in the form of disease
now you listen
or
to
allergens.
Me, taters. You got gave a mind of a tater.
Jode, please, let me make my point.
You're tater-minded and you're looking to infiltrate old Joe's cabin, but you're too late.
No.
Now you get out, or
right,
I'll
Jode.
slice your tater heart out and fry it up on my griddle.
Okay, Jode.
Now y'all stay close here. Gonna have my jug band back here, and if Jasper don't let me strum the washboard, we're gonna resort to cutting.
This is the Onion News Network.
We're still not sure why you'd want to watch, but our video feed is streaming nightly for free at cam.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live. We are kicking off the second hour here. Phones are open, and you can join us and bring up whatever you want. The number is 603-283-6160. It's Ian and Chris in the studio tonight at 603-283-6160. Coming up, Chris, you're going to be telling us about a story from India where they're cracking down on cryptocurrency, probably in a way that the U.S. federal government would really like to.
They already did. Now,
yeah.
It's more like everybody's fleeing India, or at least their money is.
The money is. We'll talk about that coming up here, because you can't end cryptocurrency. You can't stop cryptocurrency, but you can make it difficult on the people who want to openly do business in crypto, and that's sort of where we started tonight. So we'll get to India, but where we started tonight was with the story out of the United States where the top banking regulators have issued a notice, essentially, saying to the banks, basically, look, we're not telling you it's illegal to do business with cryptocurrency exchanges or to allow your customers to buy cryptocurrency, but we are telling you that we're watching you, and we want you to know that we might consider this to be dangerous. And we wouldn't want our banks to be considered doing dangerous things, because then we might have to do something about it. We're not saying we're going to do something right now, but we are saying, look out. I mean, that's basically the subject of what this letter was. And so they're trying to intimidate the banks into no longer opening accounts for cryptocurrency exchanges or doing business with, anybody that wants to get crypto, that kind of thing. So it hasn't gone full-on prohibition, but it is intimidation. That's what's happening right now in the U.S. And then thehill.com has a story here about the whole FTX debacle. For those that haven't been paying attention to the news, this thing has been in the headlines for 2 months now, I think, at this point. It was the beginning of November when the FTX exchange went bankrupt, filed for bankruptcy. The head of the FTX exchange, Sam Bankman-Fried, a.k.a. Sam Bankman-Fraud, has been arrested since that time. He's been extradited from the Bahamas. He's now facing over 100 years in prison for various different charges, wherein, if they are true, then Mr. Bankman actually did defraud people. Though, like, he's accused of fraud in a way that the Crypto 6 were not accused of fraud. Crypto 6 were facing fraud charges.
He's accused of actual fraud as opposed to, like, alluding to fraud that didn't happen.
Yeah, exactly. In the case of the Crypto 6 and the fraud charges that didn't end up being brought against me in trial, they were saying, well, you didn't tell the banks the full truth about what you were doing. And it's like Bankman even admitted in an interview that he did prior to the fall of the FTX exchange, in one of his myriad of media appearances, he admitted that it's standard practice within the cryptocurrency industry to not let the banks know what you're doing. Because people in the crypto world, they understand that banks are afraid of cryptocurrency for whatever the reason is. Usually it's just because they're afraid of being regulated. Some of them may be afraid because they understand the writings on the wall, and crypto could end the banking oligopoly altogether, which is, of course, exactly what the federal government wants to try to stop from happening. And so now they are going to, according to this opinion piece at thehill.com by Kristen Tate, she says that they were already working on this CBDC, the central bank digital currency, but now they're going to use maybe the FTX situation as the excuse to push it through, is the speculation here. So they're saying that the FTX issue, or she says the FTX issue isn't large enough under normal circumstances to push through such dramatic banking and financial changes, but it's clear that those at the Federal Reserve and many in Congress have been salivating for those changes for years. This could be a fig leaf to justify it. The loss of billions of dollars through the collapse of FTX is beginning to echo through the economy. Both private investors and crypto holders lost big in the company's collapse. With nearly 1 million customers, the similarities to previous large-scale collapses are obvious. The criminal charges against Bankman perhaps offer someone on whom to pin responsibility, but not a means to fix the damage. By the way, you can't fix this damage. That money it's gone, right?
Yeah, what's actually funny though about this is they add insult to injury because the government is effectively arguing something like it's FTX's. It's not okay. So this is actually a different case I'm thinking of, but in another very similar case, they're arguing it's the company's money, not your money.
Celsius.
Yeah.
Celsius was, prior to FTX, the other sort of big crypto company failure of the year of 2022. Celsius was one of those, let's call it a crypto loans outfit or a centralized finance crypto loan outfit, meaning that they offered people a APR, a certain 5 to 10%, something that's way higher than you would get from a bank, for instance. So sounded too good to be true. Turns out it was too good to be true. So Celsius offered this big APR on people that would deposit, say, Bitcoin or some other cryptocurrency into their system. And then they would loan that crypto out to others who would then, of course, pay interest on the loan. And that, in theory, was how they were supposed to be making money. But, of course, there were some shenanigans going on ostensibly behind the scenes. I don't know what all the details were there. But similar to the FTX thing, they weren't doing what they said they were doing. And there was a big crash of cryptocurrency, and they were over-leveraged or extended, and the house of cards came down. And then what you're referring to is in the bankruptcy case in Celsius, because they still have a little bit of money left, just not enough to cover all the assets that their customers gave to them. The decision that was made this week by the judge in that case was that based on Celsius's terms of service, which the judge says was crystal clear, if you actually read the terms of service, but how many people do this? If you read the terms of service, it said that when you deposited your Bitcoin and or whatever other cryptocurrencies with Celsius, that they became the property of Celsius.
Ooh, interesting.
So that the people who deposited those coins do not have a valid claim to them.
You know what's interesting about this too is this is actually not unusual in the financial industry. If you look at PayPal has similar terms.
Really?
Yeah. It's not your money. This is why they can basically seize the funds in
and
your
don't
account
have to give it back.
Don't have to give it back because it's their money effectively until it ends up in your account and like bank account or something. It's not your money. Banks have certain fiduciary responsibility or duty, and PayPal doesn't because it's just a money. It's like a register as a money transmitter, but not a
They're not a bank.
It's not a bank. So and
that's an interesting.
PayPal gets even more interesting because they claim the right to take money from your bank account too. So if you link your account in order to get if you're not getting a check from them and you link your account to withdraw money from them, they can pull it back too. According to the terms, at least. I don't know if it's I don't know if there's I don't know if I mean there might be something to protect you as a consumer there, but I mean
in theory you might be able to go to your bank and reverse the payment or fight with PayPal.
Yeah,
over that.
I mean I wouldn't want to have to. In most situations, it's going to cost you more in lawyer fees probably than what you'll get back, depending on how much they take. But maybe in some certain circumstances where they take a couple $100,000, then maybe, yeah.
That's interesting. I was not aware of that about PayPal because I didn't read the terms of service either. When I signed up for PayPal, it was the late 1990s or whenever it was, and it was like, this is cool. You can buy things on the internet.
Every once in a while, I'll read a terms of service, and especially like financial at banks and PayPal, and I'll follow. I've been following this stuff for many 30 years probably or so, and since the 90s at least, and it's. Yeah, there's some interesting things you learn.
There's the other crazy thing about terms of service is most of them have terms within them that say they can update the terms of service anytime they want.
Right.
And in some cases, I don't think they even have to notify you. In other cases, they just have to notify you about it. So, you'll get a little letter or you'll get an email or something.
It's your responsibility to check the terms of service every day and make sure. And if you want to not agree to, you'll usually have like 30 days or something like that to like opt out.
Right. Cancel your account. To
cancel your account.
They essentially say if you continue using your account with us, that indicates that you have consented to the new terms.
I don't even know if it's continue using your account. I think it's like just opting out. Like if you don't opt out, you're automatically agreeing to whatever.
You don't get to opt out. It's like if you opt out, you're closing your account.
Right.
That's the only other option.
Opting out is closing your account.
You just can't say, "Oh, well, I'll stick with the old terms." No, you don't. You don't have that choice. So it's a very one-sided thing. Terms of service aren't a real contract. They're just this sort of this one-sided dictation, basically, that if you want to do business with this company, you have to let them do whatever they want to you.
This is why we need real competition, though, I think. It's like you're never going to have, when you have these super regulated entities like banks and, financial institutions, and there's no competition in the marketplace, like, what do you do if PayPal, you can't do business with, say, PayPal, and you're a merchant, right? I mean,
good luck.
That makes things really, really difficult because they have an almost monopoly in the market. And in some markets, they do.
Right. Who's their competitor?
Well, I mean, on some place like maybe eBay, for a long time, there was no competition. You could only use PayPal. So
right. And then I think eBay actually got rid of PayPal or vice versa.
They did. So in theory, you cannot accept PayPal on eBay now. But
yeah, finally.
Yeah. I mean, it's. So
is eBay doing their own credit card processing? Is that how that works?
eBay, yeah, that's exactly how it works with I believe the new system. But yeah, they will basically, they are acting as a merchant provider and doing, and they're actually forcing people over to that system as well.
Yeah.
So I think you can still use PayPal, I guess.
Right.
But I'm not entirely sure. But I guess you have to accept. I don't know. It's really.
eBay sucks. They've gone from being they went from being like the internet golden child to just a terrible platform where they're just molesting people for ridiculous fees and and they they don't have a lot of competition. I guess Amazon technically is a competitor for eBay at this point because they seem to sell a lot of the same stuff. Like a lot of the vendors on eBay are also vending on Amazon.
I mean, the problem is that eBay has stuff that Amazon definitely does not.
Still, okay.
Yeah. I mean, so I don't know.
It's still probably easier for an individual to sell on eBay than it is on Amazon.
Right, and that's part of it. Like not anybody can sell on Amazon. It's not a auction site, Amazon. Right. It's you sign up and you apply and you fill out all this paperwork and then they accept you. Whereas eBay, you basically can sign up immediately and list something. So.
If you want to join the show, the number is 603-283-6160. So we're talking about the speculation here that the federal government is going to use the FTX failure as an excuse to push the concept of the central bank digital currency, or at least that's the theory being proposed by Kristen Tate over at thehill.com. I'm going to continue here with this. So they point out that FTX had 1 million or nearly 1 million customers, and that the criminal charges are a way to pin responsibility on Bankman, but not a means to fix the damage. The purported remedy instead may be the largest fiscal overhaul since the creation of the Federal Reserve. A switch to a cashless, centrally controlled digital form of currency could be relatively simple. Currently, the Fed and several major banks are running a digital dollar pilot and is being pushed as a good idea by media outlets, including opinion writers in the Wall Street Journal. The Fed is preparing the electronic form of currency in conjunction with similar efforts by other nations. After all, the argument may go, if the United States doesn't innovate, China or someone else will. And by the way, China has been working on a CBDC for couple years now, I think, at least. So I don't know if it's done in China. I have not heard the latest on the CBDC status there, but
I'm still trying to figure out what the difference is between these other digital currencies governments have and like a central bank digital currency, because
I can tell you
they have stuff that sort of seems like it's exactly the same.
So my understanding of the difference is the CBDC will be completely run by the Federal Reserve, meaning that
okay, so there's no intermediary like a Visa or
there's
MasterCard.
no bank or whatever. It'll be there's no Visa or MasterCard. The Federal Reserve is going to have an app essentially that individuals will have control. They will have their own accounts directly with the Federal Reserve if it works out in this way, right? It may not, right? Like, because they're still planning and plotting, and the major banks have a say in this. Like, they're going to weigh in, and maybe it will turn out that the banks will be able to deal in the CBDC. So it's not real clear yet, but in theory, the way it could work is that you, as a quote-unquote U.S. citizen with a social security number, would download the Federal Reserve app and put in all your ID and whatever, and then you have your access to your account balance via the Federal Reserve. Now, you know it's going to suck. You know their app's going to be trash. It's going to be a government, app, and government apps and government websites are terrible, so it's going to likely be an absolutely awful user experience. But that is something that they want, as I understand it, that's what they ideally want to be able to do, is essentially cut out the banks and just deal directly with individuals.
I mean, that seems like it would be really hard to achieve without paying the banks off in some way, because
that's the hard part, right?
Because you're going to have, the banking industry is huge, and they're going to they have a lot of money to,
and they are the Federal Reserve, right? So how are they going to do this? How are they going to get away with that total control vision for?
I wonder if this is the kind of thing that's designed to fail, like intentionally designed to fail, and
I don't know if it's intentional.
Well, I mean,
it may fail, but
but hold on a second. Think about this. So they create this digital currency, the central bank digital currency. It's not going to work. They know I would think they know it's not going to work because it doesn't have the value that cryptocurrencies have. Use that to then ban cryptocurrencies and say, well, now we have our central bank digital currency. And then when it fails, well, doesn't really matter because, that's what they kind of wanted in the first place because they have so much money coming through.
You're saying the banks want this to fail. You're saying the banks would essentially program this thing to bomb.
Right, because they're going to use this as maybe the excuse to ban or, make it basically impossible to use, actual cryptocurrency.
Well, yeah, they certainly aren't going to allow you to send the Federal Reserve or the central bank digital currency to buy crypto with, right? Like that'll be on the list of no-goes in that case. But it still remains to be seen exactly what the interactions with the banks will be with this thing, because if it's indeed a Federal Reserve totally controlled by the center currency, then banks won't be able to issue loans with it. Right? They won't be able to create the CBDC from thin air because they don't have that authorization. So banks still may be able to loan the old form of the dollar. They may not take that away from the banks as a result of this. They may allow the banks to be sort of the portal where somebody can take their cash dollars and turn them into the CBDC, but not reverse. You know what I mean? Like where there's only a one-way in and you can't get out kind of
or make it
situation.
Particularly difficult to get out if,
Yeah,
might be another way to do it.
Right, so all that still remains to be seen, and that's why they're trying their digital dollar pilot with some of the major banks out there. Some in Congress are already supporting the idea of a CBDC, and FTX may have provided just the grounds needed for a transition to such a system. A digital dollar would enable near total control of each person's transactions. This would extend far further than the IRS $600 income rule and could have massive impacts on taxation, earnings, and privacy. The ability to instantly track, catalog, and scrutinize every person's transactions is a dystopian nightmare. Considering the relative efficiency of the IRS, it is entirely probable the agency could send out audit letters to people for Venmoing their friends back for their share of a restaurant bill or taxi ride. Furthermore, the digital dollar likely will coincide with the gradual abolishment of physical cash. And this may come into where you were presuming that they might do like India did.
Yeah.
and other countries have done.
I mean, the U.S. has already done it. It's just not to the degree that India has done it.
Right. And in fact, she even says the same thing here. She says there may be some ability to keep small denominations or amounts, but if the transition mimics Franklin Roosevelt's Executive Order 6102 banning most private ownership of gold, your financial autonomy would be at risk. So imagine that what they might do here is they're going to have a transition period, right? Like they don't want to they can't get rid of cash immediately. They just can't. Like there's still some people that don't have a smartphone, or politicians still need to get paid off with cash, that kind of thing.
It's
so
got to be a way to bribe politicians with.
Yeah, so there's still going to be a reason to have cash, but maybe they'll get rid of the $100 bill. Maybe they'll get rid of the $50 bill. Maybe it'll just be 1s, 2s, 5s, and 20s from here on out, right? That's a possibility.
20 is probably too big.
They won't do that right off the bat. They'll do the 100s. They'll do the 50s. Maybe they'll do the 100s and the 50s together.
Yeah.
They'll leave the 20 out there for a couple years. Then they might get rid of the 20.
Yeah, I could definitely see that.
So it'll be a gradual thing. And this whole time they're going to be bringing the corporations on with accepting the CBDC and then encouraging the corporations to pay in the CBDC. And so there's going to be the total inside the system surf that is completely CBDCized. And then there's still going to be the people that are kind of outside the system, people that want to avoid financial controls, and just the unbanked who just, or the Luddites who don't want to have technology. And there's going to be solutions for those people, but they won't be system solutions. There'll be something that the market comes up with or whatever. It'll be interesting to see how it pans out. Hopefully we never have to see this, but it seems like the direction they want to take things. So who in Washington, she says here at thehill.com, wouldn't support the end of traditional cash? There will be plenty of politicians and pundits who extol the advantages, an end to counterfeiting, and an effective end to traditional money laundering and difficulty for criminals to pay for drugs. It can also be used to track questionable purchases and donations. Does it look like you're buying cocaine or illegal firearms? You're tracked. What about donating to the Canadian truckers the next time there's a protest? After all, it's happened before. Donate to the wrong political cause? Perhaps your information is leaked. These are all events that have modern-day precursors in our country, Canada, China, and beyond. If you listen to the government, a digital dollar sounds like a panacea built on the end of economic liberty. There are key advantages to the federal and state governments. Your Social Security, welfare, or paycheck would be deposited instantly. Your bank accounts would be synced with the Federal Reserve databases, your movements tracked through transactions, and you would become an asset to the Federal Reserve just as much as digitally printed dollars. If you believe that such a concept is either far-fetched or likely only far in the future, think again. China's dictatorship learned the full implications of monetary and social control over its population through digital currency and its social credit system. That's the other side of the coin here, right? Meaning that if you are a bad person as far as the government is concerned, if you say things that the government doesn't like, if you're a danger to the status quo in some sort of peaceful manner, but you say things that they don't like, then they can blackmark you in the social credit system.
This will never happen. I mean, come on.
In the U.S.?
That's China. It's a dictatorship. It's communist, right?
It is communist. Yeah.
It can never happen in the United States.
Why not?
Good question.
Yeah.
Sweden, is it Sweden? I think it's Sweden. Has already done it. I mean, they've already
really
pretty much
social credit.
No, not social credit. But
you're talking about cashless.
Cashless.
Yeah.
They basically already have it. If you try to spend cash, good luck. Nobody will take it.
I've heard that. Yeah.
Yeah.
China launched the world's first digital currency, and it includes several concerning elements. Its record of transactions is private unless law enforcement needs them. And although in an early stage, China's digital yuan is used by more than 200 million people. Okay, so this answers my question. I was wondering what the status was of the Chinese CBDC. They're saying it's going. It's happening. Used by more than 200 million people and just past 100 billion yuan in transactions. Not only that, there's a very real possibility that those blacklisted by the Chinese government will be unable to use currency at all. What does that mean for those people? I was going to say, how do you feed your family if you can't use the currency? There's more coming up here. The number is 603-283-6160. You can join us. Free Talk Live.
Free Talk Live.
In order for this government to be legitimate, it had to have been legitimate in the first place. And that means that every person who was involved, who was on the North American continent at the time, had to have agreed to it. And if it was set up by force, if it was set up at the point of a bayonet, then it wouldn't be legitimate. It wouldn't be any more legitimate than me sticking a knife in your ribs and saying, give me your wallet. Oh, you gave me the wallet. It's legitimate. So the very fact that this government was set up by force, it was set up by killing other people, means that it's not legitimate.
That doesn't even go into the fact that everyone who set it up is long dead. It's been assumed to be this real thing, this valid thing because of the magic scroll. They wrote a magic scroll. You know, they got out a piece of paper and wrote it down, and voila, and now it's a real thing that has legitimacy, right?
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern, live on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Simon Marks. Republican Kevin McCarthy may be just hours away now from becoming the new Speaker of the House of Representatives. He managed to persuade 15 dissident Republicans who opposed him in a dozen separate votes to back him. And work continues to secure the remaining support he needs, not just to win the job, but to bring an extraordinary week of chaos on Capitol Hill to an end. From FSN's Washington Bureau, Caroline Malone reports.
Kevin McCarthy is almost the new House Speaker. A furious lobbying campaign is underway to get as many of the Republicans voting against him to change their minds. McCarthy has had to make concessions to convince the hard-right, more conservative members of the Republican Party not to vote against him.
Meanwhile, President Biden has been marking the second anniversary of the January 6th uprising by Donald Trump's supporters on Capitol Hill. He awarded the Presidential Citizens Medal to more than a dozen police officers and election workers who pushed back against his predecessor's false claims that the 2020 US election was rigged. In other news, a major defense package has been announced for Ukraine, with several Western countries banding together to provide infantry fighting vehicles for the country's ground forces. The US, Germany and France will supply the equipment, as FSN's Trent Murray reports from our Berlin bureau.
2 different types of infantry fighting vehicles are being given to Ukraine. The US-made Bradley and German-made Marder. Neither are considered a tank, but both have mounted firepower and also provide armoured protection for troops being transported in conflict zones. While the number of deliveries has not yet been confirmed, the German outlet Der Spiegel reports that as many as 40 Marders could be on their way. Germany has also donated a Patriot air defence battery to help Ukraine intercept Russian missiles.
A group of British Union leaders say they're hoping to have a meaningful conversation with Prime Minister Rishi Sunak on Monday. The face-to-face gathering will occur after ambulance workers became the latest public sector employees to announce industrial action later this month. The Prime Minister says he's open to discussing affordable solutions to the crisis, but Paul Novak of the Trades Union Congress says the devil will be in the details.
What they haven't invited us to do next week is to have meaningful negotiations about the current pay disputes. What they've said is that we can have technical discussions about the remit of the pay review bodies for the coming. And I think those sorts of technical discussions aren't going to help our paramedics, our firefighters, our civil servants and our teachers pay their bills right now.
Inflation in the Eurozone is back in single figures, having dropped for the second month in a row. The latest numbers are boosting hopes that the bloc's economic woes might be easing, and unemployment in the US fell from 3.7 to 3.5% in December, but the latest numbers announced on Friday were slightly higher than analysts predicted. From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
You can help spread the ideas of liberty with our Patreon for just $5 per month at amps.freetalklive.com.
It is Free Talk Live. Phones are open. You can join us. Number 603-283-6160. In the studio tonight, it's Ian
and Chris.
We are talking about the so-called central bank digital currency, or CBDC. It's something that, unfortunately, you're likely to hear more about in the coming months and years as the federal government is, in the interest of trying to catch up to China's totalitarian state, trying to implement the same thing here in the United States, where there's a central bank digital currency. Not the digital dollar as you're used to seeing on a credit card statement, because those are digital, but something completely different, something that doesn't necessarily involve the banks, something that is issued directly from the Federal Reserve, that would result in them, for instance, issuing payments on welfare or perhaps even paychecks or whatever, just coming straight from the Federal Reserve. So we can talk more about that coming up here. We're going to go to your phone calls and thoughts. Neil is on the line in Arizona. Neil, you're on Free Talk Live, listening to K-Talks. Go ahead, sir.
Hey, guys. How you doing? First of all, shout out to Chuck in Longview, Washington. I want to talk about the cashless currency. Yeah. I didn't realize this until recently. I have a friend that works at, if you're familiar with Knott's Berry Farm in Buena Park, California.
I've heard of them.
You can actually pay with cash to get in the front gate. It's kind of like Disneyland, but on a much smaller scale. But once you're in the park, cash does you absolutely no good. You can't buy a hot dog, a soda, play the arcade games. You can't do anything with cash in there.
It's crazy.
Yikes. Yeah, we were just talking about off air how we have a Chipotle in Keene that they also won't take cash.
And that may be a corporate decision, too. I think that may be all stores.
And do you think part of this is because the people that they're hiring to run cash registers these days have no idea how to make change?
It can't be, because literally the registers tell you how much change to give people.
Yeah, but you still have to be able to count.
Oh, they haven't gotten through the third grade.
Right.
I recently made a purchase, and it was $11.12. And I handed the cashier a $100 bill and $2, and they said, "Why are you giving me this much? It's so much, way more than you owe me."
Yeah.
I said, "Just punch in $102. It'll tell you what to give me back." Oh, now I get it. I mean, it's just weird. The people they're putting to work these days that have no. If that register didn't tell them how much change to give you, they'd be lost.
Well, that's been true for probably decades. I mean, people rely on their tools. There's no doubt about that. But it's worse now than it's ever been. And I'll give you an example of this. There's, I wish I could credit the name of the channel. I don't remember offhand. But Bonnie and I found this channel on YouTube where it's this younger guy who goes into malls and on like Times Square and places where there's a lot of people. And he talks with what appear to be mostly Generation Z and the millennial generation, younger people. And he asks some of the most basic questions. Now, obviously, they're going to cut out the people that get the questions right. I mean, that's clear, right? But there's a shocking number of people who, when asked questions like, how many dimes are there in a dollar? They do not know the answer. They have
that's sad.
They have no idea. And I just couldn't. To me, this was just like bewildering until I heard Benjamin, who is the Goldback, one of the Goldback guys from Goldback.com. He gave a speech at the Porcupine Freedom Festival, which I watched later on because I wasn't able to attend it in person most of the time last year due to my bail conditions. But he gave an excellent speech about, using real money instead of the government money. And he talked about how the younger generations, they are raised with credit cards. They're raised with debit cards. They're raised with these cashless options and cashless systems to where they don't get, as you and I might have, Neil, when we were growing up, 50 cents for, taking out the trash from our parents or, doing household chores. They don't have dollars. They have a debit card that their parents let them have. And for them, they've maybe never even spent dollars. They've never received dimes as change.
They get them hooked young, too. Schools, I don't know if they're still doing it this way, but I know in the, not 90s maybe, but early 2000s, a lot of schools went to, in order to buy lunch, you couldn't use dollars anymore. You had to
thumbprint.
Thumbprint or a card. Used to be, basically like a debit card, except it would only work in the schools.
And your parents had to load it.
And your parents had to load it. And
Yeah, so I think that's part of the reason here, Neil. I think these people have literally never had to change a dollar before.
Absolutely. And before you let me go, I would love it if you guys would make a prediction for me. What do you think Sarah will talk about tonight?
I mean, it's almost always traffic, although she's been, a little more. She's been bringing a little more variety to the table. We did tell her a few weeks back that she's just not allowed to talk about the same thing over and over again. So, so there is that. I don't know. We'll find out. She already called in once, but we didn't get her on right away, so she'll call back though. Thank you, Neil.
Okay, guys.
Thanks for the call tonight, man. I appreciate it. Let's bring in Major Payne on the line in Michigan. Go ahead, Major.
Oh, guys, you guys got me all distracted with that side babble there.
where was I going to go?
Something about cashless. I think you were going to comment on the whole CBDC thing.
Well, I filed for Social Security here last spring.
Okay.
And they demanded that I get a bank account where they could get direct deposit and have my numbers.
Right.
Well, I have yet to do that, and they keep sending me checks. And on the back of every envelope, it says, "You must obey the command from the dictator." Right?
Meaning on the back of the envelope, they're telling you better get a bank account?
Yeah. They say, you must comply.
Mm-hmm.
I could go out and get the envelope. I just got one today. It's sitting on the dashboard of my truck. I could read it to you verbatim. But, they're telling me, I must comply.
Or else what?
And I refuse to do so.
Right. Yeah. Or else what? What are they going to do?
I don't see why I should have to even go open a separate bank account just to have this damn thing put in.
Wait, they want you to
owed me for 60 frickin' years, right?
Hold on, just to clarify, do you already have a bank account, or are you a bankless person?
Well, I have a bank account, but I'm sure as hell not giving them my numbers.
Oh,
yeah.
I see.
So let me get you straight. They're not telling you to open up a separate bank account. They just want a bank account, and you're not willing to give it to them, which is good for you, man. Good for you, because we need more people standing up to this things I can't say on air nonsense. There's just not enough of us, unfortunately.
Yeah, I told you I had a bitch strike. I am the unhackable Charlie Brown.
Anything else, Major?
Well, you guys were talking about the paper trail of money and whatnot.
Yeah.
Before the FDIC and all that was invented, the independent banks, especially out west in the gold field, they could print up their own notes.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it was quite handy. I mean, it's pretty hard to carry $10,000 in gold unless you got an extra mule, and then you're making yourself a slow target for a bad bunch of banditos.
Mm-hmm.
So paper was much easier to conceal, promissory notes and such. But, of course, there's always, rotten apples in the barrel, and unless you got a bank that's, like, backed by a gold mine, like, I don't know if you guys have ever watched Deadwood or not, but
I did.
That's quite a tale there.
It was a pretty entertaining show. I enjoyed that one. Major, thanks for the call tonight. I do appreciate it. The number here is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. We're talking about the central bank digital currency, the idea of the Federal Reserve itself just allowing the average person to have an account, maybe even forcing the average person to have an account. Of course, there's always going to be the ornery folks like Major Payne and Chris, you and me, and people that I don't want to comply with this system that they're going to try to force down our throats, like the Chinese government. And they're saying here the digital yuan, the new CBDC in China, is already used by more than 200 million people. And remember, China's got like 1 billion people, so they're still not there yet with a full rollout of this thing. It's going to take time. China offers the model that we would be loath to follow. This is from thehill.com, the article by Kristen Tate, one of their opinion contributors, and she's against this idea, which I'm grateful to see in the mainstream publication here. She says, however, more regulation in the recent crypto crash may say otherwise. Democrats always seem to find a way to win in cases like the FTX collapse. A young, incompetent CEO gets to donate to left-wing causes, receives fawning media profiles, and then his company crushes the dreams of 1 million investors. Despite the reported heavy donations to left-wingers, they can simply accuse him of similar yet untraceable donations to Republicans in order to muddy the waters, and allegedly he did donate to Republicans. Democrats then can use the circumstances they benefited from to push for far-reaching regulation that will expand the power of the regulatory state. She says here finally that the collapse of FTX was perhaps predictable, but not intentional, although some people believe otherwise. Some people believe that FTX was a scam from the word go, and that Sam Bankman had himself a back door that he programmed into the system just so he could raid it when it all came crashing down. The vulture-like actions, she says, by those in power to take advantage of the disaster are both predictable and intentional. After all, to paraphrase Rahm Emanuel, never let a crisis go to waste. It says here Kristen Tate is a libertarian writer and analyst for Young Americans for Liberty. She's the author of the latest book, How Do I Tax Thee? A Field Guide to the Great American Ripoff. Her Twitter handle is Kristen B. Tate. Pretty good story there, although it certainly does not foretell good things, which again is the launch or the potential creation of a central bank digital currency here in the United States. Again, we don't know exactly what that's going to look like. The Federal Reserve, in tandem with some of the major banks right now, is in the middle of a digital dollar pilot in order to test out some of this technology, presumably sort of like as an interbank thing. According to the story from Reuters, it started back in November. It is a 12-week-long pilot program, including biggies like MasterCard, Wells Fargo, Citigroup. So when MasterCard's involved, they are trying to figure out how they can stay in business, right?
Oh, yeah.
What can they do to ensure that they can continue to provide services to businesses that will give them their 3% that they're used to getting on every single transaction, even in the aftermath of whatever this CBDC creation is going to be. So, whatever this thing ends up looking like, it is going to be one ugly mother. It's going to benefit the Federal Reserve by more tracking and more ownership of your total financial from head to toe, from beginning to end of your life, and it's going to benefit the banks somehow. And it's not really clear how that's going to be, but they're going to figure something out, because the banks are not going to let this thing move forward without their approval. And you have to remember, the banks are the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve isn't a government agency. It's a private organization made up of member banks, right? Like that's what they are. They provide the they're the lender of last resort to the federal government as far as treasury bonds, if I recall how that system works correctly, meaning that when the Treasury wants to sell their bonds, they sell them on the open market to whoever wants to buy them. Sometimes there are other nations that are buying a bunch of them, and individuals and that sort of thing. And then if there's some they can't sell, then I believe the Federal Reserve has an obligation to come in and buy those. That's one of the things they print the money for, right? So they print up the money, and then they buy the treasury bonds with them. So, we'll see how this all shakes out. It definitely is going to be ugly when it's all said and done with. And again, they haven't figured out any of the details of this thing yet. So if you want to comment, you're welcome to join us here. The number is 603-283-6160. It's going to be tough, to take people like Major Payne, who he's going to die without ever getting that bank account. He's going to pass away without having that bank account that the Federal Reserve wants him to have. But maybe they're sort of counting on that. Maybe they understand that, look, this is going to take 20 years. This is going to take 2 generations. But eventually, they'll get them. They'll get all of the young people.
This is why they target young, they target young people with, you have to use your fingerprint to, pay for stuff, or a card, or, whatever, because they want to force young people to get used to while they're still, they effectively got to do what you say, right? As opposed to an adult. Adults can kind of get away with not doing what, the government wants a little bit more easily. Kids can't. They're dominated by adults and by schools and government.
Sure, and their whole world is digital. The Generation Z. I mean, these are in many cases not even adults yet. Generation Z goes back, I think, to like 2010, maybe, I believe, somewhere around that range. So people born after 2010 or whatever. The next one, I think they're calling it Generation Alpha because they ran out of letters. So going around the beginning. So like these people in generation so-called Z, they are essentially from, I believe, like 1997 through roughly 2011, something to that effect, 2012, 15-year window. They had the internet, from the very beginning. They had they were there when they were a little baby playing on the computer, and as soon as tablets came out, they got those, right? Like they may not know a lot about how the internet works, but they've been part of that generation for their entire lives. Whereas you and I, Chris, when we were born in the 1980s, the internet was just in its genesis phase, right? Like there was maybe some universities that might have been experimenting with.
There was no internet until the 90s.
Yeah.
There were networks, and there was dial-up BBSs and things like that, but not quite the internet. And there was CompuServe or a little bit before the internet and AOL.
Toward the late 80s, I think CompuServe or whatever.
Early
came out.
90s. Early 90s.
But wasn't the federal government with the universities experimenting with internet sort of things like in the early days?
The internet was a government network called ARPANET. And it was basically the government created another network for itself and then said, okay, what was the ARPANET, right? They said, okay, well, you guys can commercialize this now. Now, all of a sudden, you could sell stuff on ARPANET, whereas before you couldn't sell stuff on the ARPANET, right? There were domain names, but you couldn't sell stuff on.
But wasn't
ARPANET.
that in the 80s? ARPANET?
ARPANET, yeah, it was in the 80s, yeah.
That's kind of what I meant when I said like hardly anyone had access to it, but it kind of existed.
It was universities, primarily, governments, I
remember when I first got on the internet, it was probably like 1992 or 3 or something like that, or maybe 94, somewhere in that range.
Would have been 94.
Yeah. I think I had like dial-up, and then you could turn that dial-up into a graphics-based thing through a special program or whatever, PPP or whatever it was, and there was this whole procedure to be able to see an image on the internet back in the day. But I don't even remember. Why were we talking about the internet? I forget. But the phones are open if you want to join us here at 603-283-6160. Oh yeah, it was the kids, the young people, right? So we grew up where we didn't have that from day zero, but these kids today they have it from day zero. Generation Alpha, even more so, right? Like Generation Z, at least in the late 90s, they would have still had to have like an actual computer in front of them. Generation Alpha, if you were born in 2011 or 2012, then I mean you literally had tablets and smartphones and the whole deal the entire time. So these young people are completely acclimated to digital payments. Many of them, as the guy from Goldback.com was saying in his speech at PorkFest, have never opened a physical wallet except to pull out a credit card or a debit card. Maybe their parents, even though they may not be old enough to, quote-unquote, have their own credit card, you can still get a bank account with your parents' permission at a young age. You know, you go in with your parents, you open the bank account, and I presume that means you can be authorized to have a debit card at a young age, too. Right? Like if you can get a bank account, shouldn't you be able to have a debit card associated?
This is something I think I know the answer to. And maybe it's not still true, but there was not like a legal limit on like having a checking account, and the checking account is what enables you to have a debit card. So
right. I think it was just the banks themselves that have limits. They have rules that they set for themselves about that.
Interesting question. In like the 90s, I got my first debit card when I was like 11. And
so there you go.
I was probably like the only person at 11 who had a debit card. A debit card, I guess it was.
You can't get credit until you're 18.
I don't know if there's a law on that or not, but I don't think you would usually be issued credit for sure.
Yeah, I don't think they want to deal with you.
Yeah, right. For other reasons, and contractual reasons too. But but you might be able to be a signer on a credit card, even if you're not the holder of the card or a card in your name, but you're not. There's a lot of
and that's one of the reasons why a lot of banks won't open an account for someone under 18 is because of the contractual issues that they wouldn't be able to hold them liable for signing an agreement with them.
Right.
They could do it if they wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, so
and that's why they have the mom and dad come in and co-sign.
There are ways around a lot of this stuff. Like as a young person, you can get different types of cards where nobody's actually IDing you.
You mean like a prepaid debit card or something, or a prepaid
card? You only
card?
You only need a social security number, and you can have up to like $750 maybe or something like that on the card preloaded. So there's different ways to work around some of this. PayPal. Anybody can pretty much sign up for an account and get a card in the mail. So sure, it's not technically a bank account, but you can deposit.
It's as useful in many ways, right?
Right, because I don't know if
you can receive payments and you can spend it on the debit card.
Right, but you could fund a PayPal account, at least back in the day, using a money order from a post office, just as an example, or a cashier's check. So
But kids aren't doing that, right? Like you're a teenager today.
I was in the 90s.
I know you were, but I'm talking about kids today, right? Like young people today.
I don't know that kids
they're not
were
going
doing
and buying
it
a
in the
money
90s.
order. I doubt
I'm
it.
saying that they can. They could. So there are ways young people can get around these issues. And I'm sure there were other people, in the 90s doing it, young people, but there were more people there. I mean, everybody was doing it in the 90s because, credit cards weren't as common then. And for a variety of reasons. I mean, if you went on eBay in the 90s, people would say, oh, I accept money orders. They might not even have an ability to accept.
These days, yeah, probably not.
Well,
let's go to the phones
back
here.
Back in those days, you might only be able to use a money order to buy something
in
on
the
eBay.
very beginning.
Right,
yeah.
right.
Before pre-PayPal.
Right, and that's when I was on eBay in the early days. So.
Let's talk to Sarah. She's on the line in New Mexico. Sarah, we've been talking about cashless payments and PayPal and getting welfare payments from the government. I figured somebody knows a thing or two about welfare payments. It's got to be Sarah. So I'm glad that you called in. Sarah, can you tell us, are you somebody who gets the welfare payment in the form of a check, or do you get a direct deposit into a bank account?
Or is it some sort of card?
Well, it's not welfare. I'm on permanent disability. There's a difference. So I'm
well, whatever you want to call it. Does the disability check, is it a check, or does it come into your bank account directly via direct deposit, or is it on a card?
Well, I chose to have a direct deposit into my bank account.
Okay.
So, but I don't know if they have a prepaid load card. That's what I heard for people with bad credit.
Mm-hmm.
For my electronic benefit transfer, it comes automatically in my check debit card, like a debit card, and also the cash benefit. And those are people for on welfare. It's supposed to be temporary. So those are welfare when you're in a need, when you don't have any money until. But you have to be homeless and be out of work for a whole year for you to prove to the government that you need help. Otherwise, they're not going to help you. So you have to be completely without.
Okay.
But I was wondering, I was wondering if our speeding camera tickets could be paid out of our debit card. Also, I was kind of wondering what the payment plans are. But
why would you wonder about that? You don't drive.
Well, there was a topic brought up because now our state, we're allowed to put the cameras on the freeways and the state highways just everywhere. We put that language together.
You didn't do it.
So, well, I mean, I was talking to Mo Maestas, and
who's that?
They shot up his house. Representative Mo Maesta, he was going to help me to change the language. He's a
somebody
lawyer,
shot up his house.
And Senator Lopez and Commissioner Ms. O'Malley, and then
they shot her house up too.
Yeah, there's 4 of them. 4, and then Torres, our district attorney. But they say that it's one guy that did it, and I think all this happened after we're going to put the cameras everywhere.
You think that the reason why people got their houses shot up is over speeding cameras? I mean, I don't know if I buy that one. They probably crossed somebody that they shouldn't have crossed for other reasons. Would be my guess. The odds that somebody is going to go and attempt murder over speeding cameras seems pretty unlikely to me. But thank you, sir.
That was my line.
For the call tonight. There's more coming up here. Hour number 3 is on the way. It's Free Talk Live.
Hey, you are going to love the movie Victimless Crime Spree. It's hilarious, heartwarming, and carries a ton of inspiring freedom messages. Feeling down about the lack of liberty in your life? You need to put on this film with some friends and have a good laugh. It's a true story about me and my friends in New Hampshire living free, singing, dancing, and getting arrested. Of course, it's all on video, and the bad guys, the cops, judges, bailiffs, and sheriffs, they all play their part like it's out of a movie or something. You would think we scripted the whole thing, but it's real life. Go ahead and have a watch, and if it's been a while, have another look. I guarantee you'll notice things now that you didn't notice before. And the best part is that you're going to walk away feeling a renewed sense of your own power. You are the master of your destiny, and you will be free in your lifetime. Victimless Crime Spree.
Is oral health important to you? If you don't like your own teeth, fresh breath, or kissing people, then by all means stop listening. Several years ago, I met Jessica Armand, founder and CEO of My Magic Mud, and I became passionate about the product that she created and never want to live without it. It's clinically proven to whiten teeth, but I find it does much more. They want you to love My Magic Mud as much as I do, so they're giving you a money-back guarantee plus 20% off. Go to mymagicmud.com and use coupon code FTL20 at checkout. mymagicmud.com, FTL20.
If you want to know the latest about Free Talk Live before we go on the air, all you need to decide is how you want it delivered. It's your choice. Visit news.freetalklive.com to receive our usually weekly news updates by email. Plus, we have a Twitter account at twitter.freetalklive.com, and you can follow us on the decentralized Mastodon platform at toot.freetalklive.com. So please follow us at toot.freetalklive.com and sign up for our emails at news.freetalklive.com.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 3 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Simon Marks. Republican Kevin McCarthy may be just hours away now from becoming the new Speaker of the House of Representatives. He managed to persuade 15 dissident Republicans who opposed him in a dozen separate votes to back him. And work continues to secure the remaining support he needs, not just to win the job, but to bring an extraordinary week of chaos on Capitol Hill to an end. From FSN's Washington Bureau, Caroline Malone reports.
Kevin McCarthy is almost the new House Speaker. A furious lobbying campaign is underway to get as many of the Republicans voting against him to change their minds. McCarthy has had to make concessions to convince the hard-right, more conservative members of the Republican Party not to vote against him.
Meanwhile, President Biden has been marking the second anniversary of the January 6th uprising by Donald Trump's supporters on Capitol Hill. He awarded the Presidential Citizens Medal to more than a dozen police officers and election workers who pushed back against his predecessor's false claims that the 2020 US election was rigged. In other news, a major defence package has been announced for Ukraine, with several Western countries banding together to provide infantry fighting vehicles for the country's ground forces. The US, Germany and France will supply the equipment, as FSN's Trent Murray reports from our Berlin bureau.
2 different types of infantry fighting vehicles are being given to Ukraine. The US-made Bradley and German-made Marder. Neither are considered a tank, but both have mounted firepower and also provide armoured protection for troops being transported in conflict zones. While the number of deliveries has not yet been confirmed, the German outlet Der Spiegel reports that as many as 40 Marders could be on their way. Germany has also donated a Patriot air defence battery to help Ukraine intercept Russian missiles.
A group of British Union leaders say they're hoping to have a meaningful conversation with Prime Minister Rishi Sunak on Monday. The face-to-face gathering will occur after ambulance workers became the latest public sector employees to announce industrial action later this month. The Prime Minister says he's open to discussing affordable solutions to the crisis, but Paul Novak of the Trades Union Congress says the devil will be in the details.
What they haven't invited us to do next week is to have meaningful negotiations about the current pay disputes. What they've said is that we can have technical discussions about the remit of the pay review bodies for the coming. And I think those sorts of technical discussions aren't going to help our paramedics, our firefighters, our civil servants and our teachers pay their bills right now.
Inflation in the Eurozone is back in single figures, having dropped for the second month in a row. The latest numbers are boosting hopes that the bloc's economic woes might be easing. And unemployment in the US fell from 3.7 to 3.5% in December, but the latest numbers announced on Friday were slightly higher than analysts predicted. From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks. With no further ado, a look at the fallout from revelations contained in Prince Harry's memoir, in which he calls his brother Prince William his arch-nemesis and claims that the heir to the British throne physically attacked him in a row over the character of Harry's wife, Meghan Markle. What to make of it all? Royal commentator Peter Hunt.
What supporters of the institution would say is we need to take a step back, we need to take a breath, we need to regulate, and we need to remember that this is an institution that weathered and and thrived and survived, and abdication crisis, the War of the Waleses, the marriage of Charles and Diana disintegrating in the 1980s, the collapse of 3 of the 4 marriages of the late Queen's children, the death of Diana in 1997. That week was probably the worst week of Queen Elizabeth's reign. They survived all that. They have prospered. And so supporters would say we need to sort of breathe and look at this in that context. I think what has changed in terms of the context is as each year passes, that level of deference that was once extended towards the royal family has abated and reduced. And I think the other key issue that the institution in particular will be focusing on is how young people see all of this and their interpretation of how the institution has treated Harry and Meghan. In polls, it is the younger people who show a sort of less strength in terms of their support for the institution of the British monarchy.
We already know what's in the book, and it's not officially out until next Tuesday. The main news again, Republican Kevin McCarthy may be just hours away from becoming the new Speaker of the House of Representatives after persuading some wavering right-wingers to back him. The US, Germany and France have jointly pledged to provide infantry fighting vehicles to Ukraine, and a group of British Union leaders say they're hoping for meaningful conversations with Prime Minister Rishi Sunak on Monday as a wave of public sector strikes cripples the country. And that is the latest feature story news. Simon Marks reporting.
Japan grants suffrage to female robots, and a hypochondriac maple tree is always convinced it has Asian longhorn beetles. The following 2 statements are true. The previous statement is false, and this is the Onion Week in Review. This week, Americans nationwide were stunned to hear horrific allegations on Wall Street revealing that numerous junior bankers have been forced to survive on a mere $6,800 per week. The findings, which implicate numerous high-profile financial institutions such as Bank of America, Morgan Stanley, and Citibank, suggest that hundreds of first-year bankers are constantly deprived of basic necessities, including penthouse apartments overlooking Central Park and regular company-financed vacations to the French Riviera.
Many of these bankers are 23 or 24 years old and don't even have access to an expense account of over $50,000 a year. Not only that, but some of them are making as little as 20 times minimum wage. I mean, this is truly disgraceful.
This is the Onion News Network.
Yep, we still do email. Drop your email address in the entry box at freetalklive.com, and you'll be kept in the loop with Free Talk Live. Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live. You can join the show here. Join us at 603-283-6160. That's our number. The phones are open, and you can bring up anything you want to discuss. That's what we do here on Free Talk Live. Open phones every night. And we're here live 7 nights a week. Here tonight, it's Ian.
And Chris.
Join us online anytime you want. Just head over to freetalklive.com, and you can get behind what we do here at Free Talk Live, as Suzanne Borho has done. She is a gold level supporter of the show, which means she's doing $10 a month over at amps.freetalklive.com. That's amps.freetalklive.com. AMPS stands for Advertise, Market, Promote, and Support. It is a way for you to support our mission of spreading the ideas of liberty and peace and freedom and cryptocurrency and other alternatives to the state system every single night of the week on broadcast radio and online as well. It's been a really good week so far this week with the new show clock that we've introduced, where we've cut out 2 entire breaks an hour. If you've been listening, you probably already noticed the difference. That also means we go to the phones here, in many cases with unscreened calls, because we don't have the budget for that kind of thing. So let's talk to this person here. You're on the air on Free Talk Live. Go ahead.
Hello?
Hey, you're on the air. What's your name?
Yeah, you were talking about cryptocurrency and a central bank digital currency.
We were.
And it just so happens that I have written quite a few articles on this subject, and I also give presentations on it at tech conferences. There aren't really many accredited experts on this right now, but I'm kind of in it pretty deep.
All right.
And I'll be happy to tell you some of the things about it that I've been able to figure out over the past few years.
Well, tell me, first of all, what are the what are the big banks proposing for what their involvement ought to be in this? Because we know the major idea, the major concept of the central bank digital currency is that the Federal Reserve would have total awareness of everybody's transactions and likely
100%.
likely that all welfare payments and government payments would be issued through it. But we know the Federal Reserve Bank is made up of these big banks, and they're not just going to go disappear just because the Federal Reserve.
Well, you're absolutely right on this. There's a couple of points on this that you're bringing up. First of all, the way that they will try to force people to use it is by making it impossible to avoid, by giving Social Security checks and things like that only through the CBDC, which means you can't avoid it. Like the gentleman that called in earlier that didn't want to give his bank account. Well, tough. We're not giving you an option. You have to, right? But secondly, this presents an existential threat to the big banks, because the truth of the matter is we already have digital currency. Your debit card uses digital currency, PayPal, whatever. And so all this really does is kind of create an end around on the big banks, right? The Federal Reserve will be your bank. They will be your bank account. And that's pretty dystopian if you really think about it. Now, one solution that they're trying to come up with, because certainly the big banks aren't going to take this lying down, is that, believe it or not, they're actually trying to create two different versions of the CBDC. One will be a private, shall we say, internal CBDC that will be used between the government, between the big banks, etc. And then there will be what they call a retail CBDC, which is the CBDC for you, me, and everybody else. And they will have two different functionalities to them. But the retail CBDC really is pretty dystopian, and I try to avoid conspiracy theory stuff, but this would require you to use a digital wallet approved by the federal government. All of your currency, the CBDC, will be tracked. Of course, they would be able to limit things like what you can buy, how much you can spend. They could take money out of it immediately. I mean, the federal government would have complete control over the wallet. And the real push for the CBDC, of course, is a response to cryptocurrency, because Bitcoin and the more advanced cryptocurrencies really do pose an existential threat to centralized fiat. The different fiat currencies around the world, they're in real trouble once people start using crypto. And rest assured, the federal government absolutely understands this.
Sure, and that's why they're trying to head this off by coming out with the CBDC as soon as they possibly can. But just to focus on your idea of not that it's your idea, but the idea you're proposing here that you've heard about, this double-sided CBDC, where there's the internal banker CBDC for internal settlements, and then there's the retail one. What would the big banks be involved in when it comes to the retail CBDC? Would these wallets be administered by the big banks? Would Bank of America have its own CBDC quote-unquote wallet that's sort of branded as their bank? Or would this be straight with the Federal Reserve? Would accounts be held?
This would be straight with the Federal Reserve.
Okay.
Right? But you see, what you're touching on is the problem that ultimately has not been figured out. And again, in a crazy dystopian world, you and I use the Federal Reserve as our bank account through this CBDC. What we're doing is taking all the liquidity out of the commercial banks. The CBDC would do exactly what cryptocurrency is doing, and that's render commercial banks unnecessary. I don't need a commercial bank if Uncle Sam holds all of my money. And so, we've got
but wait, hold on. Before you go on, you don't generally, for like day-to-day transactions, but loans, the Federal Reserve is not going to want to. They're not going to want to have an office where the average person who needs, a $5,000 car loan is going to come in and sit and fill out paperwork to get an approval. So I would presume that would still be left to the big banks to play with.
Of course it would, but where are the banks going to get the money that they loan out? If Uncle Sam is holding all of your money, you don't have any money in the big bank.
Well, no. You should know, but you should know that the banks don't actually loan out money that they have. They create it. They have fine.
Well, they do.
Yeah.
And so you're right. And so it's a really vexing problem because yes, it will suck liquidity out of the banks, but of course, yes, you're right. Uncle Sam wouldn't be involved in giving loans. That would still rest on Bank of America and J.P. Morgan and the like.
Right.
Ultimately, though, the CBDC really is just a response to the very real threat that blockchain-based assets, i.e. Bitcoin, Ethereum, etc., pose to fiat currency.
It is.
Borderless, immutable currency that no central entity can control is not what the Federal Reserve wants. It scares them to death.
I got a question for you. So how are they going to deal with the 3%, 3 to 6% that they normally charge merchants, right? Like, I mean, are merchants is there a fee structure that's laid out with this retail digital currency? I mean, I can't imagine that the banks are going to be willing to give up that, that cushy income stream.
I agree 100%. And it is a very, very cushy income stream. And people don't necessarily understand that. When Visa and MasterCard, your debit card that's a Visa MasterCard, people don't understand that those are actually managed by banks.
That's right.
And so it's a bank that gets that merchant fee. Visa and MasterCard are just the computer software that runs it.
Mm-hmm.
And you're absolutely right. With a CBDC, you wouldn't need to use a debit card anymore. Or you wouldn't need to use a Visa or a MasterCard debit card anymore. And so you're absolutely right. It puts an end around those merchant fees, and I might add, cryptocurrency does the same thing.
But yet, as we mentioned, this what they're calling the digital dollar pilot program that they've been running since mid-November, they list MasterCard as one of the entities involved in this pilot program. So they're in on the ground floor of this with an ear at the federal government to, whisper in it and say, hey, this is how it should work. So they're going to try to, like you're saying, I think the word you used is correct here. It's a vexing problem for them because on one hand, they want to have total central control of everything, but on the other hand, they are the big banks and they don't want to screw their big banking buddies.
This is what I was.
You're 100%.
I was wondering, like, do you think this might be intentionally they want this to fail? Like they're setting it up to fail just so that they can ban cryptocurrency? Like, because I'm trying to figure out, like, what is the angle here? Like, why would MasterCard, why would banks be in favor of a digital, any kind of digital currency?
What it is they understand the true existential threat that cryptocurrency poses to fiat. And so what they're desperately trying to do is find a way to compete with cryptocurrency. Okay? These are, and this is when I give my presentations, this is what I say, these are the horse breeders trying to find a way to compete with automobiles. Okay? Henry Ford has come along, the Model T exists, and they're the horse breeders desperately trying to come up with some way to compete. And ultimately, it's just not going to happen. Ultimately, we are moving into an entirely new phase of how we transfer assets, what we call money. We are taking the central control by the Federal Reserve of currency. We are taking that away, and they don't know how to solve that problem.
Well, I appreciate your optimism that you don't think that ultimately this is going to work in the long run, and I hope you're right about that. But tell me, I asked you in the beginning what your name was. You mentioned you write articles, give speeches.
My name is Trevor Smith.
Trevor.
I wrote for a Bitcoin news website called Bitcoinist for a while. And now I travel and I speak on it. And I was listening to your show and I decided to call in.
Great, man. Anything else you want to share tonight, Trevor?
Well, I would say that before anybody gets involved in cryptocurrency, and of course we know a lot of people, what is it now, 14% of the American public now own cryptocurrency?
Oh, okay. That's good.
Do your research. Study it. Do not buy any of it until you actually understand how it works. Because we know that a lot of people just got burned with FTX. And I'm sure you've heard of that. That's been in the news.
Yeah, we talked a lot about that.
That wasn't a failure of cryptocurrency.
Nope.
That was a failure of the central entity that was holding people's cryptocurrency. And so people that, well-meaning, perfectly honest people that say, I'm going to buy Bitcoin, I'm going to buy Ethereum, but they don't necessarily know how it works.
Yeah.
Well, they bought it from FTX. They let FTX hold it. FTX went bust, and now they're out. Whoops,
yeah.
Exactly. So
not your keys, not your coins, which is, the old lesson.
Keys, not your coin. 100% correct.
It's a lesson that has been taught again and again, and it will be taught again in the future because FTX is not going to be the last example of this happening.
You're not kidding there. And so, education. You have to learn how this works before you get in. And I encourage people to learn about it because blockchain is here to stay. It is absolutely here to stay. And it is a positive. It will be a net positive, even if it will be a bumpy road to get there. And once you start to study it, as I'm sure you know, you just immediately go into the deep end because you realize what kind of a revolution we're dealing with.
Yeah.
This is not small. This is huge.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, we've been longtime advocates for financial freedom here on Free Talk Live all the way back before crypto, and we were big fans of using gold and silver, and still to this day. I mean, we love the gold back here, which is a really cool alternative to using dollars in physical reality, and then of course cryptocurrency as well, which I would use if I weren't on insane bail conditions that prevented me from using it, thanks to the federal government cracking down. They've been cracking down, as I'm sure you've been following, with the SEC attacking companies and developers like Library and Ripple, and then, of course, the FBI going after people for running crypto vending machines and selling peer-to-peer. So, I mean, they're going all in on the attack against cryptocurrency.
They are going in all in. I mean, you are not kidding on that. But see, the problem is we have free speech in this country, and you can't censor computer code. And ultimately, that's all crypto is. It's just computer code.
Yeah.
And they can't shut down the internet. And you mentioned the.
I tried explaining that to the jury, and it didn't help. Just so you know.
It didn't help, huh?
No.
Well, sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
But you mentioned the SEC and the Ripple lawsuit. The SEC is trying to turn Ripple into a security, or that's their argument that Ripple is security. And as you probably know, the SEC is losing that case. They're losing in a big way.
Are they?
Ripple is
different results in Library.
Again, yeah, and Library too, and Library is who they're going after next.
No, they won against Library. Library is going to go down in flames. It looks like the only thing they haven't figured out is how much flames they're going to, how much gasoline they're going to pour on this fire. We're going to be attending the latest hearing that's going to come up later this month for the Library quote unquote settlement, where Library is expecting to not only go out of business, but maybe also lose even more than their business in some way. Like the SEC is not. They're not satisfied with just destroying Library as a corporation. They want to also destroy Odyssey, which is the sort of semi-related platform that they have for sharing videos online, and probably even worse than that. It's ugly. So they did find that the Library token in federal district court here in New Hampshire is a quote-unquote security, and that, to me, does not bode well for the Ripple case.
Well, I was going to say, you never want to presume what the court will rule until the ruling comes down.
Yeah.
You're certainly correct. But Ripple has been making an extremely strong case.
Yeah, there's a difference between those two cases.
There is, for sure.
They're similar, but they have different arguments.
And of course, like Bitcoin, remember, Bitcoin was specifically designed so that it could not be censored or shut down. It's like Napster. When people ask me what's the best analogy, I say it's like Napster 20 years ago. And yes, they were able to shut down Napster, but they couldn't shut down file sharing. The minute
That's true.
Shut down Napster, 5 more popped up.
It's probably more similar to, I believe, Kazaa. Was it Kazaa?
Mm-hmm.
That was one of them.
Yeah,
no, LimeWire. Sorry,
LimeWire.
LimeWire. It's closer to LimeWire because LimeWire, even after they shut down LimeWire, FrostWire continued for a long time, and FrostWire was literally just it was LimeWire except without the without some of the limitations of LimeWire in terms of its speed.
Trevor, thanks for calling tonight. If you have final thoughts, go ahead.
Well, the best thought that I would have here is educate yourself and be prepared for a very interesting decade. No question about it.
No doubt. Thank you, man. Appreciate the call. Thanks for weighing in here tonight. I appreciate the expertise. And that, again, Trevor Smith calling, former author there at, he said, I think it was Bitcoinist, the website.
Yeah.
Now lecturing and writing articles about the CBDC. Glad people are paying close attention because we definitely need that. Sydney is on the line in Pennsylvania. Go ahead, Sydney.
Hey guys, thanks for taking my call. That was a very insightful call. I actually hope that guy calls back, in the future because he can actually, give insightful information. I wanted to talk about Bitcoin also.
Sure.
He was optimistic that Bitcoin would win. I personally really like Bitcoin. I like alternative currencies, cryptocurrencies, alternative methods to transact, gold, silver, other methods. But I'm not optimistic like he is. So I wanted to talk about a scenario because you guys have been talking about a lot with like CBDCs today and Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
With Bitcoin, there's only going to be a certain number of tokens in total. When all the mining has found all the, Bitcoins, I think it's around 18 million. Is that right?
21 million, but there have been some that have been lost. I've heard estimates as high as like 2 to 4 million Bitcoins are like lost forever. They're in wallets that no one has access to. They've lost the keys.
Yes, I exactly wanted to get to that. Yeah, that aspect of it. So people anticipate it would end up being the reverse of the fiat system, whereas in the fiat system they can print as much money as possible.
Yeah.
In the Bitcoin and possibly also the precious metal realm, eventually you get to all of it and there's a limited supply. So I think that that's advantageous versus the fiat system.
Sure.
Because it gets you back to your principles with economics. So sound money, I think, is essential. I think a lot of the dysfunction that we see in the world is simply because money has become totally perverted.
Sure.
So, we're all working for it. It's fake. It's manipulated. And, so I'm not optimistic at all. They'll pass laws to ban Bitcoin, ban activities related to Bitcoin. I'm optimistic about the technology. I'm optimistic about freedom in the future. So I want to get to Bitcoin about this loss. Eventually there'll be a certain number of tokens. Let's say there's widespread adoption. People are using it, through, let's say, the Lightning Network or something else. It's just some fantasy world. And let's say that there are hackers that have their own store of Bitcoins. And as soon as they get Bitcoins, they destroy them. So they lose their passwords on purpose. So let's say, somebody does.
Why the hell would they do that?
That's going to be expensive.
Well, it would push up the value of what's left over. And then, so I want to get to is.
But why would they do that? Why would individuals
because
who
they already
have
a stash of it?
Because what?
They already have a stash of it.
But why wouldn't they want more? Like, why would? Why there's no economic incentive to destroy your own Bitcoins.
Well, take it off the market. They could keep the password, but keep it completely off the market. So
you're not going to increase.
For example,
you're not going to increase the value enough by destroying some of your own Bitcoin to then have
to make up
more,
the difference.
Right, to make up the difference. Like I don't think that makes any sense.
And even if you don't use the coins, like there's a lot of Bitcoin that are just sitting today. They haven't been moved in years, if ever. They're just sitting there. But in theory, they could be moved at any time. So there's no way to know.
Right.
The market has to price all that into the Bitcoin price. So what you say you're going to do with your Bitcoins doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, I mean, even if you said you destroyed, your private key or whatever that held, I don't know, 2 million, worth of Bitcoin, how can anybody know
How
for
can they
sure,
verify
right?
that? Yeah.
I mean, it could be you have a copy or somebody else has a copy or, I don't know.
Well, so for example, the federal government in Ross's trial, they got a lot of Bitcoins from that one. And there have been subsequent seizures of many types of cryptocurrency, and they sell these cryptocurrencies using a process. They're probably bound by law, but it's been a decade of cryptocurrencies, and I think that's chump change to them. But them also just holding on to it, it doesn't possibly give them much utility. So like if they had kept Ross's coins until the peak of Bitcoin last year and then put them on the market, okay, it would have brought down the price, but they could have achieved a better price. But they sold them almost immediately. I think that, Ian, they took some things from you, and they're going to liquidate those. Wouldn't they liquidate those things?
They certainly would. As soon as the I don't know if they have to wait till the appeal or if they can just get cranking. Once the sentence comes down, I'm not sure what the restrictions are on when they can do that, but I suspect they can probably do it right away.
Hearing before they can do anything, I would think.
I think they just have to file a motion. Like they have to.
So I'm no expert. Perhaps that previous person I called. It's just sort of the inversion of our current world, where instead people are holding on to things that become more and more precious as time goes by. Either they're divided up more among greater pool of participants, or there's a loss going on. People losing their passwords. They're becoming less and less Bitcoins over time, and people possibly hoarding them. So I think gold has that same sort of restriction. And I'm just playing with the idea. I'm just throwing out that hypothetical.
Well, one of the problems that I think you may be alluding to here without maybe using the name of it is this. There's this sort of economic rule or theory that essentially says bad money chases out good money. And what that means is that, given the choice, somebody that has dollars and somebody that has crypto or gold is more likely to spend the dollars because they understand that those are losing value over time, and so therefore if they have them, it makes more economic sense to get rid of them. If you're going to spend a thing, you spend the thing that's going to drop in value faster, right? So that's one of the things that crypto is actually working to try to defeat, and it's the trickiest. I think it's one of the trickiest parts to getting crypto adoption out there, and this is something that Chris, you and I have been dealing with for half a decade or something like that now, wherein even dealing with activists who know better, who should know the value of using crypto. Know that if you don't use crypto, it does not have value. It has to be useful in order for it to be valuable, but yet they will hold on to it, and they'll just keep it and, like you're saying, not use it, and then hope that it just goes up in value. Meanwhile, they're spending dollars, and that's not helping the crypto economy. It's actually hurting it, but it's sort of a natural thing. It's an issue that's very, very hard to defeat. The only way that I think it'll be defeated is if you somehow incentivize people to pay with crypto by giving them a discount, and we just don't see that often enough.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're absolutely right. We need to use these technologies, not just only talk about them. And, we need to live our principles and as much as possible.
Thank you, Sydney, for the call tonight. I totally agree with that sentiment, which is, of course, why I think that liberty-minded crypto people need to concentrate their physical jurisdiction. They need to be in the same area to where they can interact with each other with cryptocurrency, and they can buy things from local businesses with it as well. And that's, of course, what we're doing here in New Hampshire. You can join us. Check out the Free State Project. Check out the Shire Society. More coming up. On Free Talk Live, we're bringing people to the ideas of liberty every day. From wrestling superstars like Glenn Jacobs.
You guys really are having an impact, I believe. Like I said, a lot of where I am now is due to listening to Free Talk Live. You changed my mind on some very important issues years ago.
To random people tuning in on the radio.
I was kind of stuck in the left-right paradigm. I heard your show by chance on a Saturday night. From there, I went on, joined the Free State Project, and become an amplifier. So, that's really the reason why I amp is because I know that if it wasn't for you guys being on as many stations as you are, I never would have found the ideas of liberty.
You can help more people hear the message of liberty by joining Free Talk Live's AMPS program on Patreon for as little as $5 a month. And you'll get access to special perks. Visit amps.freetalklive.com, amps.freetalklive.com.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Simon Marks. Republican Kevin McCarthy may be just hours away now from becoming the new Speaker of the House of Representatives. He managed to persuade 15 dissident Republicans who opposed him in a dozen separate votes to back him. And work continues to secure the remaining support he needs, not just to win the job, but to bring an extraordinary week of chaos on Capitol Hill to an end. From FSN's Washington Bureau, Caroline Malone reports.
Kevin McCarthy is almost the new House Speaker. A furious lobbying campaign is underway to get as many of the Republicans voting against him to change their minds. McCarthy has had to make concessions to convince the hard-right, more conservative members of the Republican Party not to vote against him.
Meanwhile, President Biden has been marking the second anniversary of the January 6th uprising by Donald Trump's supporters on Capitol Hill. He awarded the Presidential Citizens Medal to more than a dozen police officers and election workers who pushed back against his predecessor's false claims that the 2020 US election was rigged. In other news, a major defense package has been announced for Ukraine, with several Western countries banding together to provide infantry fighting vehicles for the country's ground forces. The US, Germany and France will supply the equipment, as FSN's Trent Murray reports from our Berlin bureau.
2 different types of infantry fighting vehicles are being given to Ukraine. The US-made Bradley and German-made Marder. Neither are considered a tank, but both have mounted firepower and also provide armoured protection for troops being transported in conflict zones. While the number of deliveries has not yet been confirmed, the German outlet Der Spiegel reports that as many as 40 Marders could be on their way. Germany has also donated a Patriot air defence battery to help Ukraine intercept Russian missiles.
A group of British Union leaders say they're hoping to have a meaningful conversation with Prime Minister Rishi Sunak on Monday. The face-to-face gathering will occur after ambulance workers became the latest public sector employees to announce industrial action later this month. The Prime Minister says he's open to discussing affordable solutions to the crisis, but Paul Novak of the Trades Union Congress says the devil will be in the details.
What they haven't invited us to do next week is to have meaningful negotiations about the current pay disputes. What they've said is that we can have technical discussions about the remit of the pay review bodies for the coming. And I think those sorts of technical discussions aren't going to help our paramedics, our firefighters, our civil servants and our teachers pay their bills right now.
Inflation in the Eurozone is back in single figures, having dropped for the second month in a row. The latest numbers are boosting hopes that the bloc's economic woes might be easing, and unemployment in the US fell from 3.7 to 3.5% in December, but the latest numbers announced on Friday were slightly higher than analysts predicted. From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Got Telegram? You can follow our channel there and discuss show prep with other listeners at telegram.freetalklive.com.
It is Free Talk Live. You got time. If you want to join the show here, the number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Been focusing in on the cryptocurrency threat to the status quo, which is a completely peaceful threat, which is why it's so successful so far. Because the government knows how to deal with violence. They know. They're ready for that. They got Bearcats. They got machine guns. They got armor. They got grenades. They're ready for that. They know how to handle that. But they don't know what to do about people just out-competing them, about a better system that exists that people could just choose. And they really get upset about that. They're going to use violence to try to stop it, but the system that is a threat to the government system is a nonviolent system inherently. It is a peaceful system. It is Bitcoin. It is cryptocurrency. These alternatives, gold, silver, these other things that people can get into without having to ask permission from anybody. It's Ian and Chris here in the studio tonight. Let's go to David in Georgia. You're on Free Talk Live. Go ahead, David.
Hey, quick thing. First of all, I was just listening to that FSN, and can we go ahead and get rid of this whole January 6th nonsense? We know the government was afraid of the people. We know the government is afraid of the people. With that rant on that little bit over, just that FSN news story caught my attention there.
Oh, I didn't hear what the content of it was. And by the way, most of our listeners on radio stations probably have no idea. But that said, certainly the mainstream media has been blowing January 6th out of proportion for the last 2 years, and I suspect they didn't stop doing that today.
Oh, no, it was just on FSN that they were giving the police that helped quell the Capitol rioters medals of whatever. Like, yeah, baloney. Anyway, with that being said, I'm a bit worried about Bitcoin because Bitcoin's like long-term future because of the fact that it's only got 7 transactions per second capability of being done. And as the Bitcoin halvening keeps happening and less Bitcoin are being created, there is less and less incentive to continue to mine it, and the hash rate will go down, making it easier eventually to attack and hit 1% or take over. This is solved. A lot of it is solved by Monero's tail emission because there's 430 new Monero created per day. Mm-hmm. Which would technically make it slightly inflationary, but it's asymptotically zero. And
what does that mean?
It means it approaches zero. So, like, as it continues to inflate ever so slightly, it closer and closer approaches zero. So right now it's like 0.9%, and in like a couple of decades it'll be 0.5%, and even gold inflation is like 1%.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So you're saying that when a Monero block is mined, which again, Monero, for listeners that don't know, is a Bitcoin competitor. It is the privacy, is sort of the world's premier privacy coin. So you can't technically verify that there's 400 of them coming out or 430 of them every. What would you say it was every minute? When are the blocks on Monero?
The blocks are 2 minutes,
2 minutes.
And it's 0.6 Monero per block, so it's like 430 per day.
Oh, per day. Okay, I got you. Thank you. So 430 per day, and what you're saying is the number 430 is not going to go down over time, but the percentage of what that represents of the total supply of Monero obviously is going to get smaller over time.
Correct, because when it's 18 million like it is now, another 430 is whatever percent of 18 million. But then when the supply in 20 years is 25 million, well, 430 is a smaller percentage of 25 million than it is of 18 million now.
Okay. That makes sense.
It asymptotically approaches zero.
Well, Sam, so your prediction was that Bitcoin itself is going to have a tough time, given that roughly every 3 to 4 years, Bitcoin's mining reward cuts in half. So right now it's, I believe, 6.25 Bitcoin per roughly every 10 minutes when a block is mined onto the blockchain. And for listeners that don't know, the blockchain is the public ledger with Bitcoin that has every transaction on it from the very beginning of Bitcoin back in 2009. And the blocks are the transactions that have happened. That's them being permanently added to that ledger. And so every time a block is mined onto the blockchain, those transactions become permanent. They're there forever, and then the miners get paid this mining reward, which is going to get cut in half, I believe, sometime next year, meaning 2024. Isn't that right?
That's correct. Like April of 2024 is when they're predicting it.
Right, so it'll go to 3.125 Bitcoin instead of 6.25 or whatever it is. And so that will mean fewer Bitcoin come out. But I guess the prediction would be that, well, Bitcoin will likely be worth more at the time, so therefore incentive will still be present for miners to come into the picture.
I mean, doesn't it readjust anyway automatically if
the difficulty does readjust? That's
right.
true.
So if there's fewer miners.
Well, what he was saying though, Chris, is that even though the mining difficulty will readjust, meaning that if there are fewer miners, it becomes easier to find the Bitcoin block at that point.
Yeah.
And if there are more miners, it becomes harder to find the Bitcoin block. However, what David's saying is, if the total amount of mining power goes down over time, then that makes the network easier to attack. Is that right, David?
Yep. And another thing is, that the fee marketplace that they want really hasn't shown up, because when you have to pay $100 to get a Starbucks coffee for the transaction fee, like back in 2017, it's kind of failed as a currency. 7 transactions per second and really high transaction fees.
Yeah, well, that was what they intended to do. That's why MasterCard invested in the digital currency group that invested in Blockstream, and AXA, a major international banking institution, invested in Blockstream years ago. So they then started paying the key Bitcoin programmers to essentially cripple Bitcoin and stop it from being able to do what, like you said, more than 7 transactions per second.
David, let's back up a second. So you're not saying that the issue can't be fixed. You're saying they're not going to be fixed, and therefore they're going to undermine it. Effectively, those behind it are undermining it.
That's what we've been saying here for years.
Right. Just what I'm trying to understand that. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, because nothing happens. So the Bitcoin people know that this is a problem, but it's so entrenched that there will only ever be 21 million, and there should only be 1 megabyte blocks, that you can't increase the transactions per second because of the 1 megabyte blocks, and therefore the fees would go down. And you can't increase the 21 million cap, because then the whole premise of Bitcoin only having 21 million is broken.
Mm-hmm.
This digital gold thing is a complete... If I'm understanding correctly, Satoshi wanted Bitcoin to be a digital cash, not digital gold.
Right. It says it in the white paper. It's on the front page. It's the subtitle, electronic, peer-to-peer electronic cash.
And in that case, Bitcoin has failed at what it was meant to be.
Yes, that is true. But it was. But luckily, it's an open marketplace, and there are a zillion other opportunities and other options. You mentioned Monero. That's one of a myriad of other options. The privacy coins. There are others, other privacy coins competing with Monero, and there are other cryptos that are competing to be electronic cash, such as Dash and Bitcoin Cash. So, I mean, there are other opportunities out there. It's just that Bitcoin is the first on the scene. It has that network effect. It has that first mover advantage, and it has the name recognition as a result of that. And the rest of the cryptocurrency alternatives, they just don't have the recognition. People don't know what they are.
I've always heard it said, and I kind of agree with this, that Monero is what Bitcoin people thought they bought.
yeah. In 2011, I think at this point, the illusion of anonymity has been pretty smashed as far as Bitcoin is concerned, but there was a time in the past when that was what people said about Bitcoin, and they were wrong.
Pseudo-anonymity, but yeah, I mean...
Some people were saying it was anonymous back in the day. They even said it during my trial. They even said that.
Well, they explained... The crazy thing about your trial was the prosecutor explained it, and that explained the difference between anonymity and pseudo-anonymity, and then he goes on to call it anonymous.
During a closing statement.
Like during his closing statement. Like, okay.
Yeah. David, anything else?
No, that's all I had.
Thanks, man. Appreciate
Thank you for taking the call.
Yeah, I appreciate the thoughts here tonight. There's no doubt Bitcoin as a electronic cash it's dead in the water, and it's never going to be that. It at one time was. There was a time when you could send a microtransaction with Bitcoin. If you wanted to send 2 cents worth of Bitcoin to someone, it would cost you usually less than a cent to send that.
I remember that. We did it on a weekly basis, if not more.
Yeah.
Often.
And then in 2017, that cost went through the roof, and it went all the way up to, you referenced, I think, $100, or he referenced $100.
Yeah, something like that.
That did happen on some cases. I think the average hit like $10, $15, $20, $30 at one point. And that's way too much. You can't have that.
I don't think I ever paid $100, but yeah,
me neither.
Yeah,
but you can't have that. I mean, I did pay $5. I definitely paid $5 to make a transaction at least more than once. But you're not going to do that if you're going to buy a hamburger. You're not going to pay a $5 tax to the mining network just to be able to use crypto. So I mean, we already have, as we were discussing, Chris, enough trouble just getting libertarian activists who have crypto to spend that crypto. That is hard enough, and that's with the ones that don't have big fees, right? That's with the ones that cost a fraction of a penny to send to somebody like Dash or Bitcoin Cash. Just getting them to spend that is hard enough.
I think you're right, especially certain people within the community. I don't necessarily know that's the case across the community, but definitely certain people.
It doesn't happen enough, man. I mean, there's cryptocurrency meetups where still it's like me, you, Bonnie, and maybe one other person coming out. And I can't spend crypto. So I'm off the map.
That's true.
Aria's off the map. She can't spend crypto. So like, where's the even the guys in Manchester? There's a ton of crypto people there, but they don't even go when they go to their crypto meetup. They don't even go to a restaurant that takes crypto. So like, what's going on?
I mean, and this I think this is more. I don't know how do I say this.
And they're losing locations as a result of that.
Yeah, I think this is kind of one of these situations where we have a lot of how do I say this, leaders, but we don't necessarily have a lot of leaders within the crypto space within the Liberty circles, and it's everybody's doing something different, right? And so we're all in one place, and crypto gets exchanged fairly often, but
person to person, that does happen. I'm not going to take that away from that's true. Like within the libertarian movement here, there's a lot of it. You'll see it maybe a little more often at like a market day. Everybody at market day, for instance. For sure. And for listeners that don't know, that's where like once a month in most regions there's a day on which people come together in like an open room and set up tables. And if you've got you make honey at home, or you make crafts, or you're growing pigs and slaughtering them, you bring your product to market and you can sell it. And most of them will take, almost everyone there will accept crypto, and that happens. So that does happen.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I very rarely will resort to pulling out cash from my pocket, at least within the libertarian community here. That's much more rare.
I'll give you that.
I will pull out cash when it comes to like going to McDonald's or something like that, right?
That's what you have to do,
right? Because I'm definitely not going to use a credit card. But yeah, certainly it's there's different, and it's interesting. The more you look for it, I think the more you'll see cryptocurrency. Places you can spend it and use it and stuff. So it's you do have to look
but
a little bit.
It's faltering though. Like I'm the one that takes care of the map. Okay.
No, I know.
I go on coinmap.org. I can't use crypto, but I can still talk about it, right? So I call the businesses up that are on the map. Roughly once every couple of years. I don't do it all the time, but every now and then I'll go through and I'll say, hey, you still taking Bitcoin?
We got a couple problems right now,
and they're not. They're not.
Right.
A lot of them
and
are.
You're right. But we got a couple
Some
problems.
are.
We got a couple problems right now.
Yeah.
And some of them are pretty major problems. One is government, right? But two is
it scared people.
Our systems are broken. But we are working on fixing them, and I'm trying here.
I get it. But the point is
we're gonna get it fixed.
I understand that. Yeah. But the fact is the crypto community, while it may be good internally, is not very good at going external, meaning it's not good at going marketing to the businesses. It's not good at marketing.
No,
now,
terrible at marketing.
If things are broken, you can't market them. I understand that.
Right.
But in some cases, they could still go to those businesses that are still accepting crypto, the ones that still have the business owner working at it to where they can just pull out their own personal wallet, and that there's ways to do this. Where there's a will, there's a way. And what I'm saying is there's not enough of a will within the crypto community. That's my observation, having looked around and having called business owners and having them having them tell me before the problems you're talking about.
Yep.
The technical issues that have been plaguing a certain payment system that we love very much, that before that happened in Manchester, where there are actual crypto people, there's a lot of them, because Manchester's like the big city. That's where most people move to, is in that area.
Yeah.
So like they can't say there's no one here. Okay, so there's a lot of people there. There was a chocolate place on the main drag there. It's called Elm Street. It's not Main Street, it's called Elm Street for whatever reason in Manchester. That's the main road. That's where all the downtown businesses are. There was a chocolate place that was taking crypto. I talked to the owner there a couple years ago. He told me they stopped taking it. He is personally a user of cryptocurrency. So he's not one of those business owners that just took it. Like there's some business owners that'll just take it because they know their customers want it, and they want to make their customers happy. They don't really care that much here or there about crypto, but they're open-minded enough to just say yes to doing that. This guy's into crypto. He's like a trader. He's got his own collection of crypto and he's into it, but what he told me was he's not taking it as business anymore because no one wants to spend it.
Yeah, I mean, I understand where you're coming from, and I can certainly see why you'd be pessimistic. I'm
optimistic. I'm just saying that's the status quo, and it's not what it should be.
I know. I would love to see more happening, right? Mm-hmm. Don't get me wrong. I don't know if that's the best example, only because somebody selling chocolate is not the kind of thing that most
Murphy's
people
Tap Room doesn't take it either now. I was giving you the easy one.
That is a better example, I think.
That's a terrible example because the libertarians are there.
It's a better example of what you're trying to say. Okay. What you're trying to argue.
But still, it's no excuse, because you could still, once in a while, you could have a Bitcoin meetup that met at the chocolate place. You could go there. People that didn't want to buy chocolate could get a bottle of water or whatever, and some people would buy some fancy chocolates, and the owner would just have a ball being able to collect crypto once a quarter or something like that. If you did it once a quarter, it would be something for that guy. Instead, he's got zero.
I think it's definitely. I think the way to phrase it is it's much easier to get and keep on board restaurants.
Agreed.
But at the same time,
women love chocolate, though. I know you're not into women or anything like that, but but a lot of people really like chocolate. I personally not a huge fan of it. Like I could live without it totally.
I'd buy chocolate. I'm just not in that area, and I also probably wouldn't be buying it enough to make it worth keeping it.
Well, and maybe that's true, maybe it's not. But I guarantee you, if that was in this area, we would go there. We would have our crypto meetups there. We wouldn't go there every week, but we'd go there every now and then, and it hopefully would be enough to keep the staff trained, to keep the owner, to where he's like, okay, yeah, this is people buy, right? Like that's all that you need.
And another reason, and I'm going to be a bit of an optimist here, but you haven't been around non-libertarians enough, because if I was in Flemington, New Jersey, where I moved from, right, there wasn't a single person I knew who used crypto.
Oh, hell no.
So, I mean, as pessimistic as this, you're sounding real pessimistic here. You're sounding real pessimistic.
I'm just telling it like it is. That's not pessimism.
It's not going as well as I would like it to, and I think you're saying that basically too, but.
Well, of course not. I mean, obviously what we want to see happen is the way this can go better is if more liberty-minded people who are into crypto move to New Hampshire and do things with their cryptocurrency openly. Because it's great to go to a market day and be able to buy anything you want for crypto. That's effing awesome. I mean, that's a great experience for somebody to have. But what does that do for the community beyond the libertarian community? What does that do for the real life acceptance of crypto? It does absolutely nothing for it.
if we're gonna get pessimistic, I think I'll also say I wish there were more libertarians running their own businesses accepting cryptocurrencies. But so many people move and they have a job.
Yeah, well, most people aren't entrepreneurs.
I know, and it's so disappointing. I think we do have a more entrepreneurial. There's more entrepreneurs here that are libertarian, but it's not as many as I would like it to be. You know what I mean? Yeah. There's a lot to complain about in the world, I think. I like to lead by example.
Me too.
I have a business. I'm an entrepreneur. I accept cryptocurrency. I try to, encourage other people to accept it and use it and everything.
That's all you can do. And that's all you can do. And that's one of the things we've done here, I think, very well in Keene over the years, is we have been the sort of the tech leaders of the liberty movement up here. For instance, Keene adopted Telegram in 2011 or 2012 or something like that. Way before anybody was doing. Everybody was on Facebook and whatever other systems. Now, Telegram is still a centralized system. It ain't perfect, but it was a way better option at the time. And then finally, like 2 years ago, the Free State Project adopted Telegram for the Porcupine Freedom Festival for its chats.
Which is really funny because it was after we all basically got on to
the Matrix.
And you're right. We're still leading the way. I mean, we got Mastodon and we've got Nextcloud now, and
the calendar system from Nextcloud.
Right. I mean,
so we're doing more decentralizing here, and we're showing people the way. You're saying, look, hey, come on over. The water's fine. Come on in.
We're not the only ones. It's not just Keene. Portsmouth. The Seacoast. They got Nextcloud too.
The Shell, I think, did, right?
Yeah, I think the Shell. Yeah, they have Nextcloud for their calendaring stuff too. So it's we're making progress here. We do have a lot of leaders. It's just everybody's working on a little bit of something else. And look, I should be the first one to adopt some of this stuff, and I was, but at the same time, it's like it should have happened, 5 or 6 years ago in a lot of cases, and it didn't, because we all have a limited amount of time,
Yeah, that's true. And again, I don't want to make it sound like I'm pessimistic. I'm optimistic. I have to be.
This is the most pessimistic thing I've come. I didn't even know.
It's not pessimism, dude.
You're the biggest optimist. So for you to say anything that's even remotely pessimistic,
you're misdefining this. It's not pessimism. Pessimism is a fear-based mentality. The idea that things are going to be going bad, or are going bad, or going wrong. And I'm just telling you what's happening. I'm just saying that in a place where it shouldn't be like this, Manchester, New Hampshire, where there's a much higher number of cryptocurrency advocates and users, like they claim in Manchester that they have the longest running cryptocurrency meetup in, like, I don't know if it's the world or the country, but it's a big claim, and it's true.
Yeah,
they deserve that claim. It's a big one. They've had it more than a decade on a weekly basis, people having a crypto meetup. But you know what? They haven't converted the place where they're having that meetup yet. How can you do that? How can you not convert the place?
Okay, that you are having the meetup. Okay.
The restaurant or wherever it is, the bar that they have.
I thought you were talking about Murphy Tap Room. That's not where they're holding it.
For whatever reason, they didn't have it there. I don't know. Somebody doesn't like Murphy. I don't know what the deal is with that.
They have a lot of events there though, so it might be why too.
At Murphy's, that could be it. But look, man, if you're gonna do a crypto meetup, have it at the place that takes crypto. Now, because they weren't doing that, Murphy stopped taking crypto. Because the free staters that were coming in there weren't spending it.
So my understanding,
and this comes back down to the problem that I was talking about earlier, where people will not spend their crypto.
Yeah, I think you misunderstood what was going on there. I'm partially at fault. So when I've gone in a couple times and tried to spend it, I wasn't able to, but that's because they were super busy and there was one waiter staff for like 40 people. I don't necessarily, from what I've heard from other people, I don't think that's the case all the time. It's just
everyone I've asked has said they don't take it anymore. Every single person. And when I was in there with you a few weeks ago, we took a night off and we were doing some activism out in the Manchester area. I think it was in November. But I asked specifically the waitress who was in there if she could take crypto payments. She said she didn't know if that was even a possibility anymore. And other people I've spoken with about the same thing. They've said that the problem is that they don't even have the tablet. It's not charged. The staff doesn't know how to use it. By all effective purposes, no one has spent cryptocurrency in that location for months.
Ooh.
I mean, if not more than a year. I don't know when the last time it was. We used to be able to go to the AnyPay map, and we used to be able to see for ourselves when that was, and we don't get to see that anymore, but if we really wanted to, I bet we could figure out what their wallet address is and then check the address.
Yeah, you're probably right. I have to say, though, the fact that people are saying they're not accepting it, if you keep getting turned down and they keep saying no, you're
they'll stop asking.
Yeah, they'll stop asking.
Right.
So, yeah.
So that's the fault. I mean, that's their fault, right? Like it's the fault of that community for not doing what it took, because they have meetups there every week. And if somebody was asked, if at least one person every week asked about crypto, they would get a yes.
Hold on, Ian. I was able to spend cryptocurrency at Murphy's Tap Room within the last 6 months, though. So
wow, congratulations.
Yeah, so there was at least one time where somebody actually did know how to use the tablet, and they dig the tablet out, and I was able to spend it.
Well, let's throw a party. That's great.
But you're right. I think 2 other times I wasn't able to spend it in the last 6 months.
Yeah,
So
it's bad.
Yeah,
it's bad. It's a bad situation, and it was completely avoidable, because if somebody had just gone in there and on a regular basis and spent it regularly, then the staff would have kept up on it, and they would have kept the thing charged or whatever, right? So now it's dead. We're out of time for tonight. It just takes a little bit of consistent effort. That's all.
Definitely.
So I am optimistic, and I think those people just need to get on the ball in those other places, because we're still doing good here, even though I'm out of the game.
We'll get them back on board.
Yeah, we'll see you tomorrow night. Online in the meantime, freetalklive.com. The Free State Project has reached its goal of 20,000 liberty lovers who've pledged to move to New Hampshire and get active to achieve liberty in our lifetime. Perhaps you're trying to figure out what part of New Hampshire should be your destination. If so, consider Keene. You'll find more than 150 reasons to move to Keene at move.freekeene.com. Keene is famous for its historic, publicity-generating activism, as well as being the liberty media capital of the world. It's home to freekeene.com, New Hampshire's destination for liberty activism, news, and opinion. For years, we've been compiling over 150 reasons to move to Keene at move.freekeene.com, where you'll learn about some of what's happening here and what makes Keene a great place to live. If you love liberty, you'll probably enjoy anywhere you end up in the Shire. But do your due diligence first. Please visit move.freekeene.com for the full